King of Queens, CBS Wednesday.
In what may be a tachycardia-inducing presidential race, 162 for Bush at this hour, Kerry 112. That's our estimate in the Electoral College map. Now, you'll notice so many states are colored in white. Means the polls have closed there. We just don't know how things are going to go in all those states, including the big three, Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, and for that matter, the middle three, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa, where the polls have not yet closed. Now, Mika Brzezinski, we're on these returns like white on rice and analyzing everything, but why can't we make more decisions in more states? What's going on here?
Well, Dan, many states where the polls just closed, they're still in the white. For example, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, you pointed out. We have exit polls on these states, but they're so close that we have to wait on the vote count. Now, you might be asking about Ohio, because the polls there should have been closed at least 2 hours. Let's pull up the county maps in Ohio and take a look there. You can see a lot of counties are still in the white. We have exit polls that show a slim margin, but we're still waiting on the vote count, which so far is incredibly tight. Here's why. It could be a long night in Ohio. Let's pull up the boards. Polls closed late in this traditionally slow counting state. Provisional ballots in Ohio, an estimated 400,000 could be cast there, and they get counted later. And also, the possibility of legal challenges hangs over this state, so it could be, Dan, more than just a long night in Ohio.
Well, if it's a long night in Ohio, it could be a long night before we know who the next president of the United States is going to be. John Roberts, a ton of money was raised and spent by both camps for this election. Besides television, where did it go?
Dan, most of it went into television, but a lot of money also went into get out the vote campaigns. In terms of television, more than $500 million was spent just so voters could hear this.
I'm George W. Bush, and I approve this message.
I'm John Kerry, and I approve this message.
In fact, when you take a look at the advertising dollars that were spent, whether it was Republican television ads, whether it was Democratic television ads, or if you take the two ad buys and lay them one on top of the other, you can see, Dan, that all of the money was spent here through the battleground states, through the Midwest, over here in Colorado and in New Mexico, and deep down here in Florida. It's extraordinary to see how much money was spent in some of the individual states. For example, let's pull out Ohio here. $104 million went into the state of Ohio alone during this election campaign. But Ohio was the number two. Number one was Florida, where $116 million was spent on television advertising in the Sunshine State. Now then, how did voters feel about the tone of the advertising? Let's take a look at what the exit polls showed today as people went to the polls. 62% of voters believed that President Bush unfairly attacked John Kerry. 66% of people said they thought John Kerry attacked President Bush. Now, it's interesting to note here that that's not what surveys show. Surveys show that the Kerry campaign attacked President Bush far less than he attacked Kerry. But the outside groups, Dan, from the Democratic side, were almost exclusively attacking President Bush. There was also that other outreach telephone campaigns, get out the vote drives as well. 24% of people said that they were contacted by the Bush campaign. This is part of the get out the vote drive. 27%, though, were contacted by the Kerry campaign. So that's what we could see reflected tonight in the turnout for either side, Dan. If John Kerry did a better job at contacting people than George Bush did, perhaps he'll get more voters out to the polls. Dan?
John Roberts, quick look at the map. Bush 162, Kerry 112. This presidential race is still very, very much up for grabs. States in white, polls have closed, but no decision. Dan Rather at CBS News Election Headquarters in New York. May be a long night, folks. We hope that you'll stay right in here with us.
I want the money Bush is 11 stole from me, $160 million. You got 2 weeks.
Huh. We're too hot to work in this country.
Where are we going?
The physical universe we occupy, it cannot be done.
Hey, can I ask you something? It's not in my nature to be mysterious. But I can't talk about it, and I can't talk about why.
Ooh. Rated PG-13. Starts Friday, December 10th.
Maybe having your carpet cleaned once a year isn't enough. Call about our $99 special. Living brings it in. We take it out.
What makes CBS Pharmacy the leading drugstore in America? With prescriptions ready when promised, we've done away with waiting. CBS Pharmacy. Expect something extra.
Got gas, pressure, bloating? Tums doesn't treat gas, neither does Pepto-Bismol. To treat gas, use Gas-X for fast, powerful relief.
Popcorn?
Ooh. Gas-X beats the bloat, and acids don't.
With all the recent news about prescription medications, a lot of my friends are concerned about what to do for their arthritis pain. I'm not. I'm doing what my doctor told me to do years ago. Take Aleve. He said the active ingredient in Aleve has been trusted by doctors for all-day relief of minor arthritis pain for nearly 30 years. Aleve really works. But don't take my word for it. Ask your doctor if Aleve is right for you.
Aleve. Prescription strength relief without a prescription.
Go!
I'm so excited.
You think I'm insane? All those off the road. Guess what? I don't care either.
Don't keep running your frickin' mouth.
Two-time Emmy winner The Amazing Race starts Tuesday, November 16th, only on CBS. Don't miss it.
All night long so far, George Bush has led in the CBS News Electoral College race estimates. We now have Bush at 162, Kerry at 112. The states in red have gone for Bush in our estimate. Those in blue for Kerry. Those in white have had the polls closed, but so far no decision. Remember, we talked in terms of the big three, the middle three, and the little three. The big three, Florida with 27, Ohio with 20, Pennsylvania with 21. No decision in those states, may not be for a long time. Middle three, Wisconsin and Minnesota with 10 each for a total of 20. The polls have closed there, no decision. Iowa with 7 doesn't have the polls closed until the top of this next hour. Then in the little three, New Mexico with 5 electoral votes. The polls have just closed there, no decision. New Hampshire with 4. Polls have been closed there for quite some time. Hawaii, the polls will not be closed for a little while. So with the 9 most important states, none of them have been decided as yet. Dan Rather at CBS News Election Headquarters in New York. .30 in the east, 6:30 in the west. Bush picks up Louisiana in our CBS News estimate. Republicans pick up a Senate seat in South Carolina is our projection. The polls have closed now in 40 states, but this is far from over in terms of the presidential race. Right now, Senator Kerry is doing well in the Northeast, President Bush in the South and Midwest. So far, neither man has taken a state away from the other. That is to say, all the states that George Bush has carried so far, he carried in the last election. All the states that Al Gore carried, which we have estimated, have been carried by John Kerry. But the all-important battleground states are still a question mark, a slew of them. We just can't make estimates yet. A check of the electoral vote count shows President Bush is more than halfway to the 270 he needs to win re-election. But halfway is still a long, long way. And the national popular vote count at this hour, remember, well over 100 million votes are expected to be cast this year. We thought maybe we could put up the, let's try the national vote title for you here. There it is. President Bush running at 53%, John Kerry at 46%, but this is still an early hour. We'd just like to show you the national vote total from time to time. This is a popular vote. Now, looking at the map, we'll go back to our presidential map for you. All the states in red we estimate have been carried by George Bush. That includes Louisiana now. We just have put in George Bush's column Louisiana's 9 electoral votes. As you can see, George Bush, as expected, sweeping the South and southern border states on up into Indiana and West Virginia. Arkansas and Missouri, not yet decided in our estimation. All through the Midwest, running from Texas all the way up through the Dakotas, color it red, George Bush country, and Wyoming also has been put in his column by our estimate. That's what gives George Bush's 171, Kerry 112, with 270 needed to win. But let's make no mistake about it, until we know how Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania are going to go, to say nothing of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Michigan, and Iowa, where the polls have not yet closed, we aren't going to know a whole lot. Now, the Louisiana in the presidential race has been, in our estimate, put in George Bush's column. However, the Louisiana Senate race, we do not yet have a decision in that, but Leslie Stahl's South Carolina Senate drops Republican. Big win for them.
Big hit for the Democrats. This was another one of those cases where the Democrats recruited a conservative candidate, Ines Tenenbaum, very conservative on values. She appears to have fallen to a man who's even more conservative than she is, Republican Jim DeMint. Taxes and jobs were the big issues. This was Fritz Holling's seat for 38 years. Let's take a fast look at the overall Senate situation. We told you there were 9 toss-up states, and that for the Democrats to regain control, they had to take over, win 7 of the 9. Now, Dan, they have to win all of the rest that are outstanding. And in Kentucky, by the way, that race there, 90% of the votes in, it's 50-50.
Well, that's the Jim Bunning, the Republican incumbent, the baseball pitcher, still having a difficult time closing the deal.
I'll say it's the last inning. Let's see if he can pull it out.
Bob Schieffer, in the presidential race, the big states, the states are going to decide it, they're still out. But George Bush has to be feeling at least pretty good about where he stands at the moment.
I'll tell you where they're feeling good, and they haven't been feeling good all evening about this. They're feeling much better about Florida right now. By the same token, the people in the Kerry campaign are feeling pretty good now about Ohio. Now, if George Bush loses Ohio but carries Florida, by my calculations, if he wins everything else that we think he's going to win, he would then have 240 electoral votes. He would then need to win Wisconsin, Minnesota, perhaps Michigan or Iowa to get himself up to 270. By the same token, Kerry, we think, is favored to have states that will give him 190 electoral votes to start. If he does win Ohio, that's 20 more, that brings him to 210. He absolutely has to carry Pennsylvania and Michigan, and then either Minnesota or Wisconsin, maybe New Hampshire, to get him over the 270 mark. Both of these men can lose one of these big states, Dan. I don't think either of them can lose 2 of them and go on to win the presidency.
Well, that's a good point. Now, I understand some people say, listen, that's too high a calculus for me, but not really, because when you boil it down, we've said in the beginning the big 3, Florida with 27 electoral votes, Ohio with 20, Pennsylvania with 21. And just to underscore what Bob, the point he was making, was it's pretty hard to see how either man can win if he doesn't take 2 of those 3. Not to say that it's impossible, to say that if you say, well, I want George Bush to win, then you have to pull for him to win 2 of the 3 states, Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. If you're pulling for Kerry, just the opposite. Let's go to Anthony Mason down in Miami, who's been watching for voting problems. Anthony, not many in the early going, any developed yet?
It's been pretty smooth so far, Dan. We've been talking about the legal ground war at the polls today. Well, we're going to show you an exchange caught by our Las Vegas affiliate, KLAS. Watch as a Republican lawyer who is challenging voters in Las Vegas is confronted by a Democratic county commissioner, Yvonne Atkinson Gates, outside a polling station.
But you're not going to disenfranchise black folks, okay? We're not going to let that happen.
600 Democratic lawyers from California at all these polling places, and they're complaining about local citizens getting involved in the process.
We live here.
What about the 600 Democratic
we
lawyers?
Live here.
Would you mind letting me talk to him, please?
I'm not going to let you know. You're not. You on my ground. You in my neighborhood.
It's a free country,
I don't care. That's right. And you're in my neighborhood. And you.
A heated exchange in a heated election, Dan. There were no legal challenges, or have been none so far in Las Vegas or in Nevada. But during the day, campaign attorneys may have wanted to avoid the appearance of lawyering up the election. As polls have been closing, we have seen suits filed in Michigan, Florida, and Pennsylvania as attorneys try to stake their ground for any challenges tomorrow. Dan?
Well, Anthony Mason, by any reasonable analysis, someone could say, well, they don't want it to appear that there's been a lawyering up of the election, but in fact, in reality, by any reasonable analysis of what's going on, it's already been pretty well lawyered up. Russ Mitchell is in Philadelphia, has word about a challenge of absentee votes in Pennsylvania. Russ, tell us about it.
Well, Dan, yes, we have our first lawsuit of the night. Republicans have filed a suit in federal court questioning the validity of some 13,000 absentee ballots. I'm reading here because I want to get this right. Republicans have asked for additional time to count the ballots because they claim they have not been able to validate the absentee voters, and now a judge will hold a hearing tomorrow to evaluate these ballots. Now, let's say that John Kerry wins Pennsylvania, because we don't know that yet, and his margin of victory is more than 13,000 votes. We are then told that this lawsuit, again questioning 13,000 ballots, is a moot point. But we are also told, Dan, by several political observers here that this could be the first of several lawsuits to come.
Well, Russ Mitchell checked years ago here. It's no coincidence, perhaps, that this happened in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is one of those places where, at least in the inner city part of Philadelphia city proper, that John Kerry has to come out of there with a commanding lead in order to offset what is believed to be George Bush's strength in the central part of the state between Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So when you say there are going to be other suits to be filed, could some of those be filed by the Democrats in other areas, or are you talking about the probability of more suits filed by the Republicans?
This is a probability of suits being filed by both sides in this case, and you're exactly right. John Kerry has to win big in Philadelphia. We are told by locals here in Philadelphia that perhaps this Republican lawsuit is something that was filed just in case this is an incredibly close election, as we saw obviously 4 years ago in Florida. That way, there's already a mechanism in place to challenge it. But yes, Dan, those lawsuits could come from both sides of the aisle.
Russ Mitchell in Philadelphia will be in touch with you. Let's go out west, looking ahead. The polls have just closed in New Mexico a short time ago. Bill Whitaker in Albuquerque, New Mexico. New Mexico has 5 electoral votes, but it's one of our small 3. We laid out 9 states. The 3 smallest of those being New Mexico with 5, Hawaii with 4, and New Hampshire with 4. Bill, Al Gore won New Mexico last time by 366 votes. It was even closer there than it was in Florida. What's the voting like today, and what's the word?
Well, Dan, in all the battleground states, there have been massive get-out-the-vote drives. But here in New Mexico, it seems that the parties have gone into overdrive to get out the Hispanic vote. Now, why? Because Hispanics make up 42% of the vote here, more than in any other state. And as you said, forget about Florida. This was the site of the closest race 4 years ago. Al Gore won this state by just 366 votes, and the Bush campaign believes that if it can get a few more of those Hispanic votes, just a few percentage points more, they can actually win this state and its 5 electoral college votes. Now, the wild card here, the new voters, 130,000 of them, and they seem to bend towards the Democrats. Right now, it seems that New Mexico is headed for a photo finish. Dan?
Bill Whitaker, we're going to commercial. See you in a few seconds.
Lately, some of you out there are getting more from your vitamin E. The advanced protection of Ester E. Advanced because its antioxidant strength is protected. Advanced because it's readily absorbed. So get more from your E with Ester E. New from the makers of Ester C. Are you getting advanced protection from your vitamin E?
Introducing the new Cadillac STS. Let's dance. Breakthrough.
Welcome, Mold. Let's see what seasonal allergy medicine she picks today.
Pick one of those. You could be suffering in 6 hours.
Choose any of those and you could be drowsy.
Allegra 180! Last all day and non-drowsy?
Why do I even keep those others around?
Not one of these allergy medicines can give you long-lasting seasonal allergy relief without the risk of drowsiness, but Allegra 180 can.
Non-drowsy Allegra works around the clock.
For people 12 and over, side effects alone may include headache, cold, or backache.
The L's in Allegra must stand for long-lasting.
Long-lasting Allegra. The relief goes on.
Under the dull gray primer, my 40-year-old Roadster runs great. I can relate. Before I got rid of my gray hair, I felt a lot younger than I looked.
Just for Men rejuvenates hair. In 5 easy minutes, it targets only the gray hair, replacing it with subtle tones that match your own natural color.
Now the outside matches the inside.
Today's Just for Men, the Rejuvenator.
It's happening, isn't it?
Nightmare scenario. Tornadoes in Las Vegas having a hurricane-force winds in the Gulf.
Two big beasts marching to the same drum.
Hang on, we're gonna get some help!
There's been a massive power failure in Chicago. 3 million people about to get clobbered. Now we got no way to warn them.
What do we ever do, Mother Nature?
Our CBS News estimate is that George Bush can be assured of 171 Electoral College votes at this moment. John Kerry, 112 with 270 needed to win. All the states in white or the polls have closed, and we don't have an estimate yet in any of those states. The race is, it's humming along like Ray Charles, but there are increasingly fewer decisions until some of those states in the West get closed. John Roberts, we had that late tape from Osama bin Laden. Did it have any effect on the election as best we can tell?
Well, Dan, as close as we came to an October surprise was when Osama bin Laden showed up on television sets across America after being off of the airwaves for the better part of a year. And here's what our exit polling found. Of all voters, 56% said they thought that the bin Laden video was important. Of late deciders, people who only made up their mind in the last 3 days, 64% said that they thought that it was important. Now, don't forget, George Bush wants to remind voters of this critical aspect of his presidency. 55% of voters believe that George Bush is the one to trust on terrorism. So we're going to put a trust factor here. It's critical for George Bush to maintain that lead and for people to see the bin Laden video as another threat against America. But over here on the Kerry side, there may be some idea of outrage from people who believe that bin Laden still being out there is a problem for President Bush. We don't have the data to back up either one of those theories just yet, Dan, but that's one of the stories we're watching tonight. We'll revisit this a little bit later on and tell you how people are breaking one way or the other.
Well, a storyline at this hour goes along this lines. By most analysis, we are no closer to knowing who the next president of the United States is going to be right now at 9:44 Eastern Time than we did at 7 o'clock tonight when we first came on the air with this broadcast. That's because so many states are out there undecided. One of them is Wisconsin. In our middle three of importance, Ed, we had Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. Wisconsin is making it, both sides nervous because both sides think they may have to have it to win. What are the major issues in Wisconsin?
Well, I think both candidates have made an issue of religion in their lives, in their regular church attendance. And when you look at the issues that are important in Wisconsin, the most important issue is moral values. And if you look at the church attendance, which is a big factor, you look at those who went to church every week, more than a third of the population. About half of them went less often. 15% never went to church. Now, how did those groups vote? If you look at the people who went to church every week, President Bush gets 6 out of every 10 of those votes. Those who went less often, Senator Kerry gets a narrow majority, 51 to 48. Those who never went to church, Senator Kerry does very well, getting 66%. And one thing to keep in mind, that whole question of the definition of marriage that is on the ballot in so many states is also on the ballot in Wisconsin. And Wisconsin is one of those states where you can register to vote on Election Day.
Well, 12 states with 170 electoral votes are still outstanding if you look at our map. Of those painted in red or blue, no turnovers yet. You're watching and listening to... Beg pardon?
And no surprise.
And no surprises so far. You're watching and listening to CBS News election night coverage.
This year on our weekend away, Jane and I wanted adventure. I didn't want my asthma to hold me back.
Bye, honey.
You wanna go where you wanna go, do what you wanna do.
There's a different kind of asthma controller, Singulair. It's not a steroid. It's a once-a-day tablet that helps provide effective 24-hour control. And the same Singulair is also approved to help relieve a broad range of seasonal allergy symptoms. Singulair will not replace fast-acting inhalers for sudden symptoms. Continue taking your other asthma medicines unless your doctor tells you to stop or change the dose. If asthma symptoms get worse, contact your doctor at once. Side effects are generally mild and vary by age and may include headache, ear infection, sore throat, and upper respiratory infection. Ask your doctor about once-a-day Singulair. Asthma control that can help you breathe easier.
Here, I gotta be at my best to be productive, but my heartburn used to keep me up. I fought it, changed my diet, but 2-3 times a week it was there. Then I got smart and I saw my doctor. He told me it's not my fault. It's a treatable disease called acid reflux.
It can be serious, and chronic untreated heartburn can increase your risk for cancer of the esophagus.
He gave me a prescription, said take it regularly so it can help heal areas of the acid damaged. I'm sleeping better with less interruption.
Only you and your doctor should choose which medicine to take. For a free video, call 800-HRT-BURN.
So I'm wondering, what's a Thermacare heat wrap? Then I put it on my aching back and I realized, oh, it's like a heating pad without a cord. And my pain just melts away. Yes, I feel like I could do backflips. No.
Sorry, I was driving too fast.
No, my fault.
You must be gelling.
Like Magellan.
Dr. Scholl's massaging gel insoles are so soft, they make any shoe feel outrageously comfortable. Are you gelling? Dr. Scholl's.
Get ready for the biggest reunion in television history.
Welcome back to South Fork.
Join Larry Hagman, Linda Gray, Patrick Duffy, and Victoria Principal.
That's right.
With new secrets.
There's something you don't know.
Never before seen footage. Outrageous bloopers. And a surprise you'll never forget.
I think I can appreciate that.
It's the television event of the season.
Here's to Dallas.
A Dallas reunion special. CBS Sunday.
With 270 electoral votes needed to win, our CBS News estimate at this hour is Bush can be assured of 171, Kerry with 112, but the race is still wide open. So many states are undecided, and out west, many states are still voting. With us now, through the miracle of satellite television, is Vanessa Kerry, daughter of the Democratic nominee, who's speaking to us from Boston. Thank you very much for being with us, Ms. Kerry. How does the Kerry team feel at this hour? Got to be a little bit nervous.
We are just waiting and watching and encouraging people to continue to go to the polls. We're optimistic, and I think we are a team who has always waited until everything is done before we really sort of either celebrate or not. And I feel really good about this evening, but it's really been, this decision is in the hands of the American people, and I think that's the best part about this, is that every vote that should be counted will be counted, and everybody should just go to the polls.
How does your father handle this? I mean, everybody handles stress like this in a different way. Does he pace the floor? Does he hum Springsteen? Does he watch television? Does he eat? What does he do?
No, I have to say, my dad has traveled this country, and he has really felt the hope the American people have invested in him, in his winning this evening. And I think that with that behind him, and knowing that he really basically wants to fight to give this country better leadership, he's been very focused on that. And it's been a pretty extraordinary thing to watch, and I've been humbled by it, and I have felt very privileged and very honored to have been a part of this campaign and to have watched my father really fight for something he believes in.
Well, Vanessa Kerry, give us a little insight of the states that are still out. There's so many still out. Tell us the ones that, well, you personally feel very confident about, if any.
The state of Massachusetts. I have to say, I am somebody who, I'm a little bit superstitious this way. I don't like to make predictions public. I don't like to make my thoughts public. I'm somebody who will write them down, date them, seal them, and then show you I'll show you tomorrow. And if you'll give me that opportunity to continue that tradition, I'd appreciate it. But again, I feel good, and I think as we go into this evening, you're going to see that this country is elected to have a fresh start and a real change for the future.
Well, we'll certainly try to do that. How about Teresa Kerry? How's she handling this? Does she walk the floor? Does she hum Springsteen? What does she do?
She's great. Teresa has a wonderful sense of humor. When I saw her today when we went to vote, she was just regaling with stories of being at the polls today in Pennsylvania and just sharing some funny moments. And that's what I love about her, is that she's just very real. She's very down to earth, and she really knows how to read a situation and when it's time to laugh and when it's time to give a hug, and it's a wonderful thing.
Vanessa Carey, thank you very much for taking time out on this very busy and stressful evening to be with us. We'll see you along the trail. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you very much.
A short while ago, a network pool crew was allowed into the White House and into the president's area. We'll show you that videotape right now, if we can get it up. You know, sometimes it takes a little bit for videotapes to take hold. Here's the president and his family.
I believe I will win. Thank you very much.
Can't hear much.
I'm glad to be able to watch the returns here with my family and friends, and it's going to be an exciting evening.
Well, President Bush with the family, smiling. He's laid down aces so far. He has 171 to carry his 112 with 270 needed to win in our estimate. We'll be back with you soon. Dan Rather, CBS News. Good evening. 10 p.m. in the east, 7 p.m. in the west, and the polls have now closed in 44 states, including another swing state, Iowa. And like the other swing states, we can't yet estimate a winner. In the west, Montana and Utah go for President Bush as expected. Here's the electoral vote count at this hour. Remember, it takes 270 win. Our CBS News estimate is that President Bush now has 179 of the 270 needed to win. John Kerry has 112. However, the big decisive states, as you can see, there's the ones in white, are still out. Here's the latest national popular vote count. President Bush leading, as he has been all evening, this now in the order of 52 to 47%, with, we would guess, something less than a fourth of the total number of votes cast actually in and counted. Now let's look at the map. Remember, red states we project are for Bush, blue states we project for Kerry. These are our projections. Polls closed in 4 more states at the top of the hour. Let's look them over now, state by state. Iowa, perhaps one of the most important states when all is said and done tonight. 7 electoral votes. The Hawkeye State has had the polls just closed there. We have a lot of data in from Iowa, but it's in the category of too close to estimate. So what's projected in Iowa is a very close race for Iowa's 7 electoral votes. Who knows, it may come down to Iowa in the end. Nevada, 5 electoral votes. Silver State, another state where it could all come down to Nevada. The Republicans, by consensus, pretty much expected to carry it. However, the Democrats thought they might slip in and take it away. The polls have closed there. This is a case of, again, too close to estimate in Nevada as well. Utah, 5 electoral votes. In the Beehive State, it is a beehive for George Bush, 5 electoral votes in Utah. Montana, also expected to send its 3 electoral votes to George Bush, does so by our CBS News estimates. So this is the way the map looks very quickly. As you can see, so many states in white there, the undecided ones, and that's what's going to decide the next president of the United States. Now, in the Senate, we started the evening with the Republicans having 51 vote majority in the U.S. Senate, 34 races up tonight. Of those 34 races, the Republicans needed 15 to retain control of the Senate. They already have won 11 by our CBS News estimate. They are well on their way not only to controlling the new Senate, but perhaps having a wider majority than they had before. But it's not over yet. The Democrats need to win in 22 of the 34 races. So far, we've estimated they've won 9. When states that had Senate races where the polls closed at 10 o'clock, this is the way things seem to have gone to us. In Iowa, Republican Senator Charles Grassley, we estimate, will be returned to the Senate from Iowa. That will be a hold on for the GOP. Nevada Senate race. Our CBS News information at the moment is we just don't have enough information. Now, this is the Senator Harry Reid is seeking a 4th term. It may not be close in Nevada, but it may be. We just don't have enough information to make even an estimate there as yet. Utah Senate. Our CBS News projection is that Senator Robert Bennett will be returned to the Senate This is a hold on for the Republicans in Utah. So good news for the Republicans thus far in the Senate races. But Leslie Stahl, that Senate race in Florida, where the Democrats almost absolutely, positively, teetotally must have that race, has been out there a long time.
It's been out there a long time. Let's look at the tabulated vote. It's quite incredible how many of these races are close. This is one of those. You have Mel Martinez, the Republican. He was the housing secretary. The White House pressured him to run because they wanted him to help pump out the Hispanic vote. He's a Cuban American running against Betty Castor, the education commissioner. What's interesting and what we're seeing tonight, Dan, is that among Hispanic votes, Martinez is getting only just about 60% of the vote, but he's getting 5% better than the president is among Hispanics in that state. But look at that. That is the tabulated vote. It's about 77% of the precincts in, and look at that. It's dead even. Isn't that something? Anyway, that is one of the close ones, and so is Kentucky. Kentucky's got about 90% of the vote in, and it's still as close as you can be.
That's where the Republican incumbent Jim Bunning is trying to beat off that very strong challenge from Dr. Dan.
That's right. Now in Florida, Dan, the incumbent is a Democrat. It's Bob Graham, and that would be a turnover if the Dems don't hold on there.
Let's see how the race for the Senate goes. It's odds on the Republicans will retain control, perhaps with a greater majority than they had as the night started. If you remember, they controlled the Senate with 51 votes, but that's not yet assured. And this presidential race certainly is not assured. Let's check the map. 270 needed to win. 185 now, as we've put in by our CBS News projections. We've added in Montana and Utah to put President Bush at 185. Now you can hear, metaphorically at least, the Republicans drawing a deep breath, sort of 185, 270 needed to win. We're getting in maybe smelling distance. However, that won't happen until some of these states in white, particularly Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, they're in white because we have them in the undecided category, to say nothing of Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa now. Missouri's been out there for a long time. The Republicans were widely expected to carry Missouri. They may yet, but we still have it colored in white, as is the case with Arkansas. There's just so much up for grabs. Mika Brzezinski, we keep coming back to you. There's so much out on the map. You know, we certainly want to know what's going on, but we know we have to be careful.
Well, let's talk about Pennsylvania in that fact, Dan, because it's posing some issues in terms of being able to make a decision so far. We have data coming in from the exit polls that does not match up with the vote count data. And according to our decision desk here, the reason for that is there may be more absentee ballots coming in than expected. And here's the issue. Here's the problem with Pennsylvania. We have
Excuse me, Mika Brzezinski, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but Arkansas, our CBS News estimate is when all the votes are in and counted, President Bush will get Arkansas 6 electoral votes. And that'll be whoopee news down in Texas and in the White House, because, as you know, former President Bill Clinton went into Arkansas trying to pull it out, what amounts to a series of three-point shots in basketball language, but they didn't go down. George Bush, our projection is, will carry Arkansas 6 electoral votes. So on our electoral map, that will, I think, put President Bush up by maybe 191. We'll just have to double check it. For right now, let's say 185, carry at 112. Mika, we'll come back to you in just a moment. But Bob, Arkansas, good news for the Republicans, because that will give them now a complete sweep of the South and all southern border states, as well as what we call the Heartland Midwest.
Well, and I think you pointed out, Dan, the Kerry campaign did not really think they had a chance in Arkansas. Bill Clinton said, wait a minute, let's back up here a minute. I think we can do some business down there. And he went down personally and campaigned. Well, it turned out the Kerry campaign was right after all. It went Republican. We're still, Dan, I mean, the only thing that has been called here tonight are the slam dunks. Everything that we expected to go to President Bush is gone to President Bush. Everything we expected to go to John Kerry has gone to Kerry. All of these battleground states where this election is going to be decided are still too close to call. We're no further along here now than we were 3 or 4 hours ago about having even a clue as to who's going to win this tonight.
One quick point, and that is that we say the states have gone to Bush and the states have gone to Kerry. You understand, folks, we project, we estimate We, if you like to call it, just give you educated guesses. But we've said it time and again, nothing is final until all the votes are counted. You can make what you will of our estimates and projections. We're trying to be conservative, trying to not put anything in anybody's color, red or blue, until we're pretty confident it is true, but you'll have to make up your mind about our educated guesses. Now, in Pennsylvania, we haven't made even an uneducated guess in Pennsylvania. The polls have been closed there, most of them, for about 2 hours. And Mika Brzezinski, you were explaining why Pennsylvania has hung out there for so long and why it may be out there for a long time yet to come.
Well, the absentee ballot issue may be a problem for Pennsylvania, and it may cause a delay in a projection in Pennsylvania. The exit polling data that we have and the vote count data that we have don't match up. The reason may be that more absentee ballots may have been cast in Pennsylvania than expected. We do not have phone screening for absentee ballots in Pennsylvania because it was such a small percentage last time around. So we're going to have to hold the phone on Pennsylvania, Dan.
Well, thanks, Mika Brzezinski. Well, Ed Bradley, fair or unfair to say that if John Kerry doesn't carry Pennsylvania, it could be the equivalent of Death Valley for him.
Well, unless he then carries Florida and Ohio. I mean, but Pennsylvania is a state. I mean, the president put a lot into Pennsylvania. He was there during his presidency 50 times, 21 times in this last year. It was a state that they thought they could win, and the Kerry people have to win there.
Well, one of the battleground states we're watching closely is Ohio. A lot of people think it may yet come down to Ohio's 20 electoral votes. Cynthia Bowers is in Columbus. Cynthia, any idea when we will have enough information to at least make an estimate on Ohio?
It's hard to say, Dan, and here is why. One of the reasons why Ohio continues to defy colorization, if you will, as a red or blue state, is the incredibly high voter turnout. As you can see by these pictures that attest to the incredible desire on the part of Ohioans to vote. Folks here are waiting in line in the rain, knowing it could be 4 or 5 hours, nearly midnight, before they cast a ballot. The Secretary of State predicts as many as 6 million of the state's 8 million voters will go to the polls today. Now, this is a state that Bush carried by only a small margin last time. Now, both sides tell us now, Dan, that despite all the litigation and concern about challengers being in the polling place, no trouble came of it. So state officials say if the only problem here is long lines, there's no problem. Dan?
Cynthia Bowers in Columbus, 270 needed to win. George Bush, we estimate, has 196. Now that CBS News has put Arkansas in his column, John Kerry with 112. Kerry obviously needs a rally, needs to rally from behind. There are plenty of states out there in which he can do that. I wouldn't say easily, but it could change suddenly. Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, not to mention Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa among them. You're watching CBS News election night coverage.
Important medical news from Caltrate on osteoporosis. The U.S. Surgeon General issued a new report stating that millions of Americans are at risk of developing osteoporosis. A major reason is they don't get enough calcium and vitamin D in their diet. For those people, the report recommends taking calcium and vitamin D supplements. Caltrate Plus D gives you the calcium and vitamin D you need. Tums doesn't have vitamin D. So get more with Caltrate, America's #1 calcium supplement.
Whether it's long or short, pointy or scruffy, extraordinarily endowed or almost non-existent, Pedigree's delicious-smelling new recipes will make your dog's nose and the rest of him very happy.
All across America, a wonderful thing happened to 46 million wireless phones. They changed overnight. They have become more versatile, more powerful, with access to the largest digital voice and data network in America and the largest mobile-to-mobile calling community. All because Cingular and AT&T Wireless have joined forces. And if you're one of those lucky 46 million customers, you don't have to do a thing. The new Cingular. We're raising the bar.
Never will there be an Alexander like you, Alexander the Great.
A leader ruled by passion.
Conquer your fear and you'll conquer death!
A king who made all men his equal.
The first rule of war is to do what you ask your men to do.
A man betrayed by his own dreams.
Fortune favors the bold.
The gods have a way of punishing such pride.
Do you want to live forever?
Alexander, an Oliver Stone film, rated R, starts November 24th.
Starting Wednesday, get ready for 5 new CSI New Yorks in a row.
That tunnel's gonna get built, and then I'm gonna die.
Fire in the hole!
He was trapped 700 feet below Manhattan, and he knew he was gonna die.
Accidents come with the territory.
These guys set their own rules.
What the hell was he doing there?
Someone left him down here intentionally. This isn't just a murder anymore. It's a conspiracy.
A new CSI New York, CBS Wednesday.
Back at CBS News Election Central, our CBS News estimate is at this hour George Bush has nailed down by our projections 185 electoral votes. John Kerry 112 with 270 needed to win. We had a slight hitch in our giddy up earlier with a little glitch in the computer, but I underscore with you 185 is the CBS News estimate right now. Kerry at 112 with 270 needed to win. John Roberts, how do national voters rate the Bush presidency?
And as we look here for some of the stories that are emerging tonight, we wanted to check in to see whether or not this election was in fact a referendum on the incumbent president. Here's what we're finding in the exit polling data. 51% of voters who went to the polls today say they approve of the job that President Bush is doing. That's up a couple of points from the way it was in the days leading up to the election. Now, take a look at another number here. Is the country headed in the right direction or the wrong direction? Americans were pretty much split over that one. Here's an interesting figure, though, that we start to see a little bit of a story emerging. 46% of people said that they were either enthusiastic or satisfied about the Bush administration. But look at this number. 52% said they were either dissatisfied or angry. So there may be a protest vote story that's starting to develop here. Let's take a look at the figures from the Kerry vote and see if, in fact, that's true. 56% of people who voted for John Kerry said they were voting for the candidate. But look at this number. 38% said that they were registering a vote against President Bush. So the enthusiasm for the candidate is almost the same number as, a little bit different here, as the number of people who were not voting for John Kerry but against President Bush. We'll see how this trend develops throughout the night. Dan?
Thanks very much. Both camps quoted the Hispanic vote. Where are they? What were they big factors or not, Ed Bradley, or do we know enough to say?
No, I think they are big factors. Obviously in Florida, where the Cubans are a big factor, but not as big a factor as they have been in the past. I think the Cubans now are outnumbered by Hispanics from the Caribbean, from Central and South America, and other parts. But Bush is winning the president is winning among Hispanics in Florida. I think we could look out west and see where Hispanics are.
Excuse me, Ed. I want to interrupt you here. Our CBS News estimate is that you can now put Missouri's 11 electoral votes in the George Bush column, and that pops him up to 196 by our CBS News projections. So President Bush, our CBS News estimate now is that he, when all the votes are counted, will have carried Missouri. Remember, these are our projections, folks. You make your own judgments on how accurate in the end you think they have been. But with 270 needed to win, Bush with 196 is our current projection, Kerry with 112. The big states that will decide this remain what we call the 3-3-3. The big three, Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Florida with 27, Ohio with 20 electoral votes, Pennsylvania with 21, Michigan with 17, Wisconsin and Minnesota with 10 each, Iowa with 7, Colorado with 9, New Mexico with 5. Arizona is not yet in, and Nevada, which also has 5, they have the polls closed as well, but we do not yet know the results. In those states that are now in white, where the polls have closed, but we do not yet have them in columns for either man, are going to decide this election. The polls are still open, let me remind you, on the West Coast and also in Alaska and Hawaii, so if you haven't voted, go out there and be sure to vote. But in Missouri, the Republicans always thought that they were going to get it, Bob Schieffer, but the Democrats, they had it on their wish list, but it slid off.
They did, but about 3 weeks ago, the Kerry people pulled out, basically, and more or less said that they were going to turn it over to the Republicans. In the beginning, they thought they had a chance, but about 3 weeks ago, they thought it's about over, and so they pulled out the resources there. So again, Dan, what we're seeing, no surprise. What we thought was going to the Bush camp so far has gone to the Bush camp. What we thought was going to John Kerry so far has gone to John Kerry. What we thought would be the battleground states, still too close to call.
You're watching CBS News election night coverage. Stay here with us. May be a long night.
We'd like to show you our underwear. Not that you can see it. Serenity Discreet for bladder control with a close-fit design and Odazor Plus to help prevent odors. Serenity Discreet. For store locations or a free sample, call this number. Introducing the new look of Serenity Bladder Control with a fresh white top sheet to help keep you dry, high-rising soft sides, and now with Odazor Plus to help prevent odors. Designed to leave you feeling fresh as a, well, you know.
Got gas, pressure, bloating? Tums doesn't treat gas, neither does Pepto-Bismol. To treat gas, use Gas X for fast, powerful relief.
Popcorn?
Gas X beats the bloat, and acids don't.
There's never been a better time to talk with your doctor about Ambien, because now you can try Ambien free. Visit Ambien.com for details.
From the very beginning, Smart Balance buttery spreads have contained no trans fatty acids and no hydrogenated oil. Trans fat can raise LDL bad cholesterol and lower HDL good cholesterol. Just the opposite of Smart Balance, which has the right balance of fats to help improve cholesterol. Smart Balance buttery spreads taste great without the cholesterol in butter or trans fat that's in margarine. It's that simple. Smart Balance buttery spreads. We have the right balance and the great taste.
Ooh, scary. Yeah, and I bet they didn't have that insurance back then. What?
Affleck.
It gives your mommy money if she's sick and can't work. What does?
Affleck.
Pay attention. To what?
Affleck.
Affleck. Ask about it at work.
Affleck.
Country music's biggest night is coming to CBS. The Country Music Association Awards. Join superstars Tim McGraw, Gretchen Wilson, Faith Hill, Rascal Flatts, Keith Urban.
Yours truly, Brooks and Dunn, and Shania Twain.
Plus more, the CMA Awards, next Tuesday live on CBS.
From Hallmark Hall of Fame, Blythe Danner, Peter Fonda, Jack Palance, Peter Riegert, and Faye Dunaway.
You hold all of us together.
Back when we were grown-ups, November 21st.
Dan Rather at CBS News Election Headquarters. Ed Bradley, we were talking about the influence or lack of influence of the Hispanic vote.
Very big in Florida, obviously very big in California, but both camps know that California is pretty much a carry state. They concede that. But there are 4 states out west that are very important, and they have significant Hispanic populations. You take a look at the state of New Mexico, 32% of the voters there are Hispanic, and 57% of them are going for Senator Kerry. Colorado, which has about 9% Hispanic vote, Senator Kerry is picking up 70% of the vote there. In Arizona, where Hispanics make up 12% of the population, Senator Kerry is winning there again, 58-42. And in Nevada, he's also doing well, winning 59 to 39%. Now, these are states with small numbers of electoral votes, but how important is New Mexico? More television ads in the Albuquerque Santa Fe market last week, the last week of the campaign, than any other market in the country.
Ed Bradley on the Hispanic vote. Our CBS News estimate is George Bush has 196 of the 270 electoral votes needed to win. John Kerry with 112. You look at the map and you say, well, it looks, virtually all Bush. But keep in mind that John Kerry's staying in the hunt based on the foundation of having carried Illinois and New York State. Don't forget out west where the polls are still open. California with 55 big electoral votes is widely expected to go to Kerry. We'll see. Dan Rather at CBS News Election Headquarters. Stay here with us. It's 10:30 in the east, 7:30 in the west. President Bush leads Senator Kerry in the battle for electoral votes, according to our CBS News projections. But put on another cup of coffee. This race is far from over. We may all be in the waiting room for quite a while yet. No winners yet in the 12 states with 145 electoral votes, and the polls are still open in 6 states with 84 votes. In sum, with 270 electoral votes needed to win, President Bush still needs to pick up 74 more. Senator Kerry needs 158 more. Kerry could get a third of that from California, where the polls are still open. Now, here's the national popular vote total. President Bush has led from the opening pop tonight. Right now, it's running on the order of 51% to 48%. That's been closing down as more votes get in and counted. We now have something on the order of about 49 or 50 million votes counted, with over 105 million expected to be cast. Let's go to the map. Bush states in red, Kerry states in blue, according to our CBS News estimates. You look at the map and you say, well, it must be all over. Looks like it's going to be George Bush. But here's one of those cases where your mother was right. Looks can be deceiving. President Bush is clearly off to a good start. We estimate he has 196 electoral votes, having swept the South and all southern border states, also run through the Midwest and making real inroads in the West. However, John Kerry, by our estimate, carrying New York and Illinois, that's the foundation of his staying in the hunt. He has 112. Keep in mind, out in the West, that a lot of people think that John Kerry is virtually a cinch to get California's 55 electoral votes. We'll have to see, but that alone, of course, could put him up within shouting distance of Bush. And with Washington State having 11, Oregon 7, should Kerry carry the whole Pacific Coast, he would very much be in it. But we keep coming back to it. If you've been with us all night, you say, oh, man, don't tell me 3, 3, and 3 again. We're going to do that. It's Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania is the big 3. The middle 3, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa, and our little 3 being New Mexico, Hawaii, and New Hampshire as the states. Those 9 may very well decide it, and we don't have decisions in any of them yet. Arizona Senator John McCain is with us in Phoenix. Congratulations on what we estimate to be your victory tonight, Senator, elected to your 4th term.
Thank you, Dan. I always believe you.
Well, and if you believe that, folks, you believe rocks can grow. But
thanks, Dan.
Bitter contest. Can the country unite behind a winner, whomever it may be?
I think we have to, and I think that the tone will be set by President Bush starting tomorrow, that we have to work together. We have too many challenges. The enemy is not the Democrats. The enemy is al-Qaeda. The enemy is the terrorists. And the Democrats are not our enemy. They're our friends. And we have to work together, and we have to face this transcendent challenge of our generation. I believe that there will be a willingness to do that because the American people expect it. And frankly, Washington isn't a very pleasant place to work lately.
Senator McCain, after record spending in this presidential contest, do you think that the campaign spending reform bill, which you were so key in getting passed, actually worked?
Well, I think it did several things. One is we had more small donors than any time in history. The parties were certainly had their power enhanced, both at the national and state and local level. Overall good. The problem, of course, is the 527s that are in violation of not McCain-Feingold, but of the previous campaign finance reform law of '74. And what we have is we have a federal election commission that refuses to enforce the law. It's a dysfunctional organization led by political apparatchiks, and we're in court. President Bush is in court with them. We will prevail, but we're going to have to reform the federal election commission, which has opened these spigots in the first place.
You think there'll be elections in Iraq in January or postponed, Senator?
I believe we will have elections in Iraq, and they may be very difficult, but I think we were able to do it in Afghanistan, and I believe we'll be able to do it in Iraq. And the sooner the Iraqi people believe they govern themselves, the better off we're going to be.
Whomever is elected president, likely or unlikely to have, by and large, U.S. troops out of Iraq by the end of next year?
No matter who is elected, he will not have them out. They will be there for a long time. The key is to keep our casualties down and eliminate those, train the military of Iraq and their police, and withdraw to our bases and only be used when necessary. We've had troops in Kosovo and Bosnia and South Korea a lot of places. Key is casualties, and that's what we have to get a hold of. It's going to be tough. It's going to be long, it's going to be hard, it's going to be expensive. Consequences of failure are devastating. Benefits of success are enormous.
Senator, you say the American people deserve a government that will work together, but how does Congress break the deadlock? Particularly, let's say that if President Bush should win and the Republicans remain in control of the Senate and the Congress, how's the deadlock going to get broken?
Well, we're going to have to, all of us sit down, and obviously the president will have to reach out. That's one of the benefits of victory and one of his obligations as well. We all know that you can't pass legislation without 60 votes in the Senate. And look, the Democrats are as tired of this partisanship as Republicans are, and we want to do something for the American people. We've got to reduce the deficit. We need immigration reform. We're going to have to address Social Security, and we're going to have to stop this this pork barrel spending. And there's a lot. I believe that the men and women I serve were honorable people, and they go to Washington to get something done, not to just fight with each other.
Senator John McCain, Arizona, again, congratulations on what we estimate will be your victory tonight in the Senate. Thanks for being with us. Good luck. We'll see you along the trail.
Thanks, Dan.
Anthony Mason's in Miami. 4 years ago at about this hour, problems arose in the Florida count. How about this year? Anthony, Florida is still out there with its 27 electoral votes.
Dan, as you say, it was at just about this hour 4 years ago that problems with vote counting first became apparent here in Florida. Reports began trickling in from Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties that something was amiss. And those problems resulted in a 35-day stalemate over who won the election. That, as they say, is history. As for today, we've just heard from Florida's Secretary of State, who is a Republican-appointed Secretary of State, that there have been very few voting problems today. One lawsuit has been filed over the mailing of absentee ballots, but the Secretary of State says the voting reforms have succeeded and the vote count is progressing. That does not mean that we're going to know anytime soon who won the state's 27 electoral votes, but it will probably be before Thanksgiving this time. However, we have just heard from Miami-Dade County that they have so many absentee ballots, 94,000, twice as many as 4 years ago, that they think it will take them at least until tomorrow to count them all. And of course, they could be critical in the swing state of Florida, Dan.
Absolutely, Anthony Mason. 270 needed to win. We estimate, we've hung on this for a few minutes, once we decided in our CBS News estimate that Missouri could be colored red for George Bush. George Bush has 196 of the 270 electoral votes needed to win. John Kerry has 112. But we were making the point, and we'll make it again, that looks can be deceiving, that while so many states are colored in red, you can say, well, it's a runaway for George Bush. It may wind up being a runaway for George Bush, but this is the point, it is not yet. There's still enough states out there, particularly the big ones, Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and then the middle ones, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and even some of the smaller ones, New Mexico with 5. Nevada's votes are still out with 5. Colorado's 9 have been out there for a long while. There is plenty of room here for John Kerry to come from behind, but you can say, well, if he's going to do it, he's going to have to hurry. But there's been very little hurried about this race so far. Jim Axelrod at Kerry headquarters in Boston. Florida hasn't dropped. What does the Kerry camp really think is going on down there?
Well, you know, a little earlier this evening, Dan, it was getting a bit tough to get information out of the Kerry camp. There was a news blackout, if you will, and it turns out there was a fairly decent reason for that. Amidst all the nervousness and anxiety and tension and nail-biting, Senator Kerry had taken a nap, which I guess goes to prove not everybody's metabolism and pulse runs at the same rate. But he does pay some people to worry for him. And here's what we're hearing from senior Kerry aides, specifically about Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Whereas they were expressing much more confidence earlier in the evening and late afternoon based on turnout, we are now told by a senior Kerry aide that they are feeling confident only about Pennsylvania, not Ohio nor Florida. Similarly, Dan, there is the other critical Midwestern group of states, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. Minnesota and Wisconsin, the Kerry camp is feeling confident about. Iowa, a little bit more of a question mark right now. Dan?
Well, if the Kerry camp, as you pointed out, Jim Axelrod, is saying, well, that it's not quite so sure about Ohio anymore, who knows on what they're basing that. But let's point out the following. We said it as the evening started, that of the big three, Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, that John Kerry would probably need to win 2 of those 3 in order to bring home a victory. And that, with Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida, all 3 still out, the news from inside the Kerry camp, it's not discouraging yet, but not nearly as encouraging as it was early in the evening. Now, for the other side, let's go to Bill Plant at the White House. How does the Bush camp feel about Florida, Bill?
Well, Dan, it's interesting because what we're hearing here mirrors what we just heard from Mr. Axelrod down in Florida, and that means the spin may actually be closer to accurate this time than usual. They say they're winning Florida. They cite good gains in Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade counties, and they say that that's even without the Panhandle, which they carried 2-1 the last time. I once asked one of the senior aides why they were campaigning there if they carried it 2-1. I said, you want 3-1? No, he said just 2.5. They know their numbers. And interestingly enough, they say that they're not doing well in Pennsylvania, just as the Kerry folks indicated. Ohio, the Bush people think they have a good chance. Now, the president did something very unusual tonight. He invited the press pool up to take a look around and see him with his family in the living quarters. And he said this.
Don't let him come any closer. Come here. Barney! Barney!
How's it going, Mr. President?
We're very upbeat, thank you.
We're going to get a winner tonight?
I believe I will win. Thank you very much. I feel good about it. I'm glad to be able to watch the returns here with my family and friends, and it's going to be an exciting evening.
Now, you got to remember the timing of that just about an hour ago was while polls were still open out west, and they still are trying to get people out to vote. That was a little bit of cheering from the commander-in-chief. Dan?
Bill Plant reporting live from the White House, where spirits seem to be on the incline. And as Jim Axelrod reported from Boston, that spirits in the Kerry camp are stasis, maybe a bit on the decline, but all of that is working around the margins. Here's the central point. Who will be the next president of the United States has not been decided, and it may not be decided for a long while yet because so many of the bigger, more important electoral states, which are said to be close, have yet to be decided. Now, Bob Sheaver, let's call a television timeout for 1 second. The chances of this winding up 269 to 269, dead even.
It could happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but it could happen. And when Jim Axelrod talks about the Kerry people not feeling as good about Ohio, that probably would be the key. Because if George Bush should win both Florida and Ohio, and if everything else goes as we think it is going to go, but then he comes along and loses Little New Hampshire and Nevada, it would wind up 269 electoral votes to 269 electoral votes. A tie could happen. I think the way it would probably happen is if George Bush wins both Florida and Ohio, but then loses those 2 smaller states, New Hampshire and Nevada.
Well, while underscoring no one expects it to end in a flat 269 tie, if it does that, it goes directly, it goes directly to the House of Representatives. It would be decided in the House, and since the Republicans control the House, that would mean a George Bush victory probably, but we're well ahead of ourselves. Right now, our CBS News estimate is George Bush 196, John Kerry 112 with 270 needed to win. Stay in here with us for CBS News election night coverage.
That was a good one. Honey, did you get it? I got it!
What would you do on your own private island? Check your mail for the Capital One No Hassle Island giveaway. You could instantly win your own island or one of hundreds of island getaways.
What's in your wallet?
We've just confirmed our top story. Kohl's 50% off sale is giving shoppers an early start on holiday shopping.
Kohl's 50% off sale is this Tuesday and Wednesday only from 7 a.m. to midnight. Save 50% on hundreds of items store-wide, like sweaters, outerwear, and sleepwear for the family.
Yeah. But knew without a trace after CSI Thursday.
Back at CBS News election headquarters, let's look at some votes actually in and counted and tabulated in some of the key states. First, in Florida. Now, it's a long way from being over in Florida, but John Kerry's moon has just moved behind a cloud as far as Florida is concerned. George Bush is widening out, and these are votes actually in and counted with 89% of the precincts reporting. Florida has not been estimated by CBS News yet as being in anybody's column, but that's the way the actual votes in and counted looked. Now, in Pennsylvania, better for John Kerry in terms of the actual votes in and counted. This is with only 61% of the precincts counted reporting in Pennsylvania. John Kerry has this kind of lead. These are all votes actually in and tabulated. In Ohio, 20 electoral votes at stake there. The actual vote count with 42% of the precincts in. George Bush leads John Kerry about 52% to 48%. Just wanted to give you those so you can get a sense of how the actual votes in and counted are going. Now, in terms of the Electoral College map, we always like to give you a look at that. One of the components of any possible Democratic victory is the size of the African-American vote. And many of the states, which have already been colored in by us as part of our estimates that went for George Bush, have large African-American populations. But in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, even Iowa, states that are still out there, it could remain a critical vote. So what about this election, John Roberts? How have those African-American votes been shaking out?
Well, Dan, we take a look at the interactive screen here to see how the vote count is building, and you can see that in cities like Chicago, you have a very, very, very high blue line, which indicates a differential of Democratic votes. Don't forget that the population of Chicago is about 37% African-American, and down here in Miami as well, you see some pretty tall towers coming out of the screen. A very high percentage of African-American votes there as well, almost reaching 25%. Let's take a look at the exit polling and find out how African Americans were voting today. 90% said that they were voting for John Kerry, 10% for President Bush. That compares with 9% in the year 2000. President Bush had said that he needed to increase fairly dramatically the number of African Americans voting for him to win a second term. Now, African Americans make up about 20% of
John Roberts,
excuse
me for breaking in. Pennsylvania, CBS News estimated drops for Kerry. 21 electoral votes. Now, you can hear the size from Massachusetts all the way here in New York and beyond, because this is one of those had-to-have states for John Kerry. 21 electoral votes. Remember, we're dealing with CBS News projections now. Nothing is official or final, but our projection is that when all the votes are in and counted, Pennsylvania's 21 will go to John Kerry. This keeps hopes alive for John Kerry, because this now means that with 270 needed to win, our CBS News estimate is George Bush gets 196, all the states in red on our map. John Kerry with 133. You say, gosh, so much of that map is red. How can Kerry be there? Well, keep in mind he's carried already New York, Pennsylvania, and Illinois, according to our CBS News estimates. Now, if you would like to look forward, the voting is still underway on the West Coast. But should John Kerry get California's 55 electoral votes, as he is widely expected to do, and pick up Oregon's 7, ? And get Washington State's 11, you can see that he would be at roughly the 200 mark. Ed Bradley.
Why did he win Pennsylvania? He won because he won in virtually every category. He won among men. He won among women. He won the union voters, and he won that all-important Catholic vote in Pennsylvania.
Well, Pennsylvania, our CBS News estimate goes in the Kerry column. Now, Bob Schieffer, we were talking about the big three. One of them has now gone into Kerry's column. Florida with 27 electoral votes, Ohio with 20. By any reasonable analysis, to have a realistic chance of winning, George Bush now must win either Florida or Ohio.
I think that's exactly right. And I think the Bush people, the last time I talked to them, were feeling better about Florida than they were about Ohio. But Ohio is still very, very much in play. And this is the first really significant thing that we've had happen here in the last couple of hours. I frankly did not see how John Kerry could win if he did not carry Pennsylvania, which, of course, the Democrats carried the last time out. Mathematically possible, practically, I just don't see how he could have done it. This is the best news they could possibly get at this hour of the evening.
But I want to underscore that it would be possible.
Oh,
Underscore
absolutely.
the word possible for George Bush to win if he doesn't carry Florida or Ohio. Mathematically, he'd have to have some upsets in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa. But
he's got to run the bottom of the table. You've been talking about the top tier and the middle tier and the bottom tier. He would have to sweep these smaller states, I think.
Well, headline of this hour is that CBS News estimates that Pennsylvania will wind up with its 21 electoral votes in John Kerry's column, making our projected count 196 for Bush, 133 for Kerry at this hour. Now, keep in mind, coming up at 11 o'clock, about 7 or 8 minutes from now, the polls will be closing in California, Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, and Idaho. So the race may become a little clearer when we get California, Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, and Idaho, if we have enough on which to base estimates. But what's happened here is John Kerry has vaulted himself back into contention by picking up Pennsylvania. Hold the phone. With Senate winner in Pennsylvania, Arlen Specter, wins re-election. That's a hold-on for the Republicans. You're watching CBS News election night coverage. 11 o'clock in the east, 8 in the west, and the polls are now closed in every state but Alaska, but no projected winner yet in the presidential race, although Bush leads. CBS News projects John Kerry will win his pot of Golden State delegates from California. That'd be 55. And CBS estimates Pennsylvania with 21 in the Kerry column as well, the first swing state with a projected winner. Idaho and Colorado put President Bush over 200 electoral votes in our CBS News estimate. Elsewhere, 11 states that we still cannot estimate, make a projection, not yet. Here's the electoral vote count with 270 needed to win. Our CBS News estimate, George Bush now has 209 and John Kerry has 199 with 270 needed to win. In the popular vote count, these are votes actually in and counted nationwide. Bush leads Kerry about 51 to 48%. In states where the polls have just closed, here are our CBS News estimates. California's 55 electoral votes go to John Kerry. Washington's 11 electoral votes goes to John Kerry. Oregon's 7 electoral votes. We don't have an estimated winner there yet in Oregon. Hawaii's 4 electoral votes, insufficient data in Hawaii. Idaho, 4 electoral votes, put them in the Bush column. He's our projected winner there. Colorado, this is from earlier in the evening, 9 electoral votes. Major win for President Bush. John Kerry thought he might win it. Kerry was born in Colorado, remember, not to be according to our CBS News estimates. George Bush, we estimate, will get Colorado's electoral votes. Now we're coming down to hours of decision, possibly, folks. 270 needed to win. We estimate Bush has 209. Kerry has 199. 270 needed to win. Florida, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa still undecided. This is election night on CBS. Now, and states where the polls have just closed and the Senate races, remember that the Republicans had a 51 vote majority in the Senate for the last 2 years. Arizona goes Republican is our CBS News projection now. The polls closed in Arizona a short while ago. We estimate that Arizona's 10 electoral votes will go for President Bush. That will give President Bush, by our CBS News projections, 219 electoral votes. John Kerry with 199. Now, 270 needed to win. What you want to look at now, in addition to Florida, which the Republicans think is leaning their way. That's not our indication, but the Republicans think Florida is leaning a little their way. 27 electoral votes. Ohio, 20 electoral votes. Nobody seems to know how that is going to go or when we'll even be able to estimate with 20 electoral votes. But a danger area, possible danger area for John Kerry. Michigan with 17, which went for Al Gore last time, has been out there for a long time. Close race indicated. Same thing in Wisconsin with 10 electoral votes. John Kerry can barely afford to lose any of these upper Midwestern votes. Minnesota with 10, undecided. Iowa with 7. All of this we put in the category, put it on us if you will, danger zone for Kerry. Because even if he carries Ohio, it's not impossible for him to win, but very difficult for him to win if he were to lose any combination of particularly Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, not to say anything about Iowa. Ed Bradley, besides that, New Mexico yet to be decided with 5 electoral votes, and Nevada with 5 yet to be decided.
And both of those states, you've got Hispanic vote, which is very important in those states. And at this point, we don't have enough data to say which way they're going to go. But this is an election year where you can see, I mean, we're sitting here after 11 o'clock, and as Bob said earlier, we really don't know any more than we knew at 7 o'clock when we went on the air. This election is so close that the vice president on Sunday flew to Hawaii. 4 electoral votes in Hawaii. But that's how close this election is.
Well, Dan, just think about it, and here's the reason. We now have Bush with 219 votes. If he should win Florida and Ohio, that would bring him to 266. He would need only 4 electoral votes to win, and he's got a lot of votes out there on the table amongst these smaller states. On the other hand, if Kerry won both of them, he'd be at 246. He'd still have a bunch of votes, but there are still votes out there to get. This is going to go right down to the wire, because my guess is that somebody is going to win. I don't think I'm not sure either of these candidates is going to win both Florida and Ohio. But that's what we got to watch. That's still where the key is. If one of them wins both of them, it's going to be he's going to be very close to getting this thing, I think.
Let me take care of a little of the business of the Senate. The Senate estimate in states where the polls have just closed, going quickly, California Senate race, our CBS News estimate is that when all the votes are in and counted in California, the Senator Barbara Boxer will have won re-election. That's a hold on for the Democrats in California. In the Hawaii Senate race, veteran Democratic Senator Daniel Inouye, our CBS News estimate is he will hold on to the Hawaii Senate race. We don't have anything approaching an estimate of how the presidential race is going to go in Hawaii, but we do think they'll hold on to their Senate seat, the Democrats there. Idaho Senate, our CBS News estimate is that will stay in the GOP column in Idaho. Oregon Senate, Senator Ron Wyden, seeking a second full term. Our CBS News estimate, he holds on to that Democratic Senate seat in Oregon. And in Washington State, some thought this might wind up to be a close race. It may yet be, but our CBS News projection is that Senator Patty Murray will get her third term by holding on to a Senate seat for the Democrats in Washington. And for Leslie Stahl, we want to get back to the presidential race, of course, but we have the Florida Senate race has not yet been decided.
And it's tight as that.
Kentucky?
Oh, the same. We may not know Kentucky till tomorrow. That's how tight that one is.
South Dakota?
South Dakota. Can we take a look at the tabulated vote? Just look at this. We have more than 40% of the precincts in. Look at that, 50-50. Less than 200 votes separating these two men. When I was out there, Senator Daschle told me that he was going to have the best get-out-the-vote effort in the entire country. He was going to have 5,000 people in there. This is a tiny state in terms of population. And still, look how tight it is. The Republican John Thune was going to campaign in the Indian reservations. This is where Senator Daschle was hoping to build up extra votes. It's really just so hard right now to determine whether the Republicans will be able to hold on or the Democrats take over the Senate at this stage.
Let's go to Philadelphia. Russ Mitchell, close all along. What happened to make it win for Kerry in Pennsylvania?
Dan, it appears the key to Kerry's victory in Pennsylvania was a massive turnout here in the city of Philadelphia, the largely Democratic city of Philadelphia. Our numbers show that John Kerry got 80% of the vote here compared to 20% for George Bush. Ralph Nader was not on the ballot. Earlier tonight, we told you about a lawsuit, Republicans challenging the validity of some 13,000 absentee ballots. There are estimates now that John Kerry could win Pennsylvania by as much as 6 points, which would be far more than 13,000 votes, which would mean the lawsuit scheduled to go to court tomorrow, scheduled for a hearing tomorrow in court, would be moot. But again, Dan, the key to Kerry's victory in Pennsylvania, massive turnout in Philadelphia, 80% of the vote going to John Kerry. Dan?
Russ Mitchell in Philadelphia. So by our CBS News estimate, again, let me underscore, italicize, put in all caps that word, our estimate that John Kerry will wind up carrying Pennsylvania. You say to yourself, all right, it looks like it might be Bush. Well, whoa. Yes, it very well may be that President Bush wins re-election. Our CBS News estimate is that he leads Kerry, and he's led him all night, when our projections now 219 to 199. But Bob Schieffer and Ed Bradley, check me as they go along. You say, well, how can Kerry win? Well, if Kerry can yet win, if he carries Florida and Ohio, but with the Republicans increasingly believing they're going to carry Florida, we haven't estimated it yet, but Kerry could win by carrying Florida and Ohio. Michigan with 17.
Minnesota.
And Minnesota
Iowa,
or Wisconsin.
Iowa and Wisconsin.
Would put him over the top. If that's a mighty big if, because that's a tough hill to climb. And again, you're looking at what may be a danger zone for Kerry in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. All three of those states were carried by Al Gore the last time, as was Iowa. The polls have been closed there for some time, which means President Bush has a chance to carry one or more of those states. Real danger zone for John Kerry's chances, because right now, John Kerry can't afford, frankly, he has to play almost airless ball the rest of the way.
Yes, and it would be very good for him if he could also carry Oregon. And, that's where we've been thinking he's going to do that, but I think he almost has to do it.
CBS News correspondent Lee Cowan is in Iowa. Lee, in Des Moines, Iowa. Lee, we've been talking about what we call the middle three, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. Those three states frequently vote the same way in presidential elections. What do you hear? What do you know? What do you think?
Well, you heard Jim Axelrod say a while ago that the Kerry campaign was a little less confident, at least here in Iowa. Again, it's still too close to make any projections whatsoever here. And again, all of these states, especially here in Iowa, like you've been talking about all night long, may come down to these early voters. Election officials here tell us that the number of people who mailed in their ballots, it's more than twice the number the last time around in 2000. It's close to nearly 500,000 people. That's a third of all the registered voters here in Iowa. And you'll remember last time, Dan, that George Bush originally had Iowa when they were counting up the Election Day ballots, but when they counted in the early voters and the absentee, it ended up falling in Al Gore's column very narrowly, but it did end up falling in Al Gore's column. The other difference this time around is Republicans had a slight edge in terms of the number of registered voters here last time around. This time, there are just as many Democrats registered as there are Republicans, and the Democrats had a very strong get-out-your-vote campaign here to get people out to the polls. They're saying here that Kerry would really have to win strong here in Des Moines, here in Cedar Rapids as well, in order to offset the traditional Republican rural vote in the western part of the state. But again, at this point, it is still just too close to call here, Dan.
Lee Cowan in Des Moines, Iowa. Our CBS News count at this hour, which is about 12 minutes after 11 o'clock in the east, about 12 minutes past 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the west, has 219 for Bush, 199 for Kerry, with 270 needed to win. Senator George Allen, Virginia's junior senator and chairman of the Republican Senatorial Committee, is with us now. I hope you can hear us, Senator. Are you confident by now? Are you prepared to say the Republicans will have control of the U.S. Senate in the next Congress?
Until all those votes are counted, I'll not say that, but I'm very proud of our candidates. They have a great organization, great positive message, and it looks good for us. South Carolina looks great. Richard Burr's leading in North Carolina. Mel Martinez slightly ahead in Florida. Johnny Isakson won in Georgia. David Vitter in Louisiana, if he actually can get over 50, it'd be remarkable. We're just thinking most likely not, since Mary Landrieu as an incumbent didn't before, but that would make history since they've never elected a Republican. Dr. Coburn won in Oklahoma. It's very close in South Dakota with John Thune. And then, of course, the polls won't close in Alaska until midnight Eastern time, and so people need to make sure they have the team of Lisa Murkowski and Ted Stevens working for them. So it looks good. I think our candidates have done a great job, great message, but still there are votes to be counted in Colorado and Wisconsin and obviously cast yet in Alaska.
Senator, what will the agenda in the next Senate be? What top three things?
Top three things. Number one will be to support our troops. Make sure we prosecute this war on terrorism, and our troops and their families have the benefits that are required and accorded to them. Secondly, will be economic issues. I'm sure tax and regulatory policies, an energy bill, getting an energy bill so we're less dependent on foreign sources of oil. If we can pick up senators, particularly in what I like to call the NFC South states, those will be added votes that will allow us to get an energy bill passed, less reliant on foreign oil, explore in Alaska. And then finally, I think that particularly if John Thune can win, that'd be like winning 3, knocking off the Democrat leader. I think we'll also have fairness accorded to the president's judicial nominees and have an up or down vote rather than this negative delays that we've seen in the last several years.
What can be done, what will be done, Senator, to increase civility and unity in the Senate?
Well, I think that in the event that the opposition will not stall all sorts of issues, such as litigation reform, medical liability, class action reform, asbestos reform, judges, energy policy in this country, if you just can have fair votes on amendments, no one should be forced to genuflect to any executive or any president and stick to their principles. But let's have fair votes on these issues rather than this gridlock and holding of measures and delays, which are so frustrating to, I think, all senators, but particularly to the American people. So once all the votes have been cast and leaders have been elected, I'm going to congratulate the leaders and the winners, as well as congratulate those who did not win. Then we have to get about the people's business. We're at war, and we ought to have some unity of purpose in the military actions, as well as things that are so important for jobs and opportunities and the competitiveness of our country, rather than just petty partisanship.
Senator Allen, thank you very much for being with us tonight. We'll see you along the way.
Dan.
Thanks. Leslie Stahl, what do you make of Senator Allen's confidence about the Republicans not only will hold the Senate, but may have a bigger majority than they had the last 2 years?
Well, I wouldn't want to argue with him, although we still have these races outstanding. What the Republicans wanted to do was have a realignment among the southern states. You have 5 Democrats retiring from the Senate in the South. And these are states that the Republicans would dearly love to pick up because the South has become Republican territory. And you had those longtime Republican incumbents holding on, and they're hoping that they could have a sweep in the Republican in these races, these 5 races you see up on the screen. You know, Dan, already the Georgia seat, which was Zell Miller's, has already gone. We project to the Democrat. And they're just hoping that they can do that with all of them tonight.
Well, let's see.
It's certainly possible.
And our CBS News estimate is that the Republicans will retain control of the United States Congress. We're not prepared to say by how many seats. Most guesses have been in the order of they'll control it 24, maybe 28 or 30 seats. We'll just have to see. But we feel confident in saying the Republicans will control the House of Representatives. Not yet certain they'll control the Senate, although it's looking that way. Mika Brzezinski, 93% of the vote is in and counted in Florida. Yet no call yet by CBS News, as far as I know, by anybody else. Why?
Well, there are 2 issues that are holding us back in Florida, Dan. Let's look at the map. As you said, with more than 90% of the precincts in, you can see that Bush has a lead. But the first issue, we're still waiting on the southern part of the state, the counties that historically vote Democratic and are voting Democratic right now. Those counties could still swing the state back to Kerry. The second issue, the same issue that haunted us 4 years ago, and Dan, that would be absentee ballots. We need a better handle as to how those are going to play out, and until then, we hold out because, of course, after all, it is Florida.
Well, and there's that old saying, if you try to read the tea leaves before the cup is done, you can get yourself burned, and having been burned once in Florida, you better believe that of all places, if we're going to get singed anywhere, we don't want it to be Florida this time, and I wouldn't kid anybody about that. Now, our CBS News estimate is at this hour, 219 for Bush, Kerry 199 with 270 needed to win. Florida and Ohio are the big ones still out there, but Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa, all states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa, all carried by Al Gore the last time. And while it isn't mathematically true that John Kerry has to carry all of those to win the presidency, as a practical matter, he may very well have to carry all of those. John Roberts reporting on the national poll. What's been the effect of Hispanic voters? I asked Ed Bradley this earlier in the evening. What is your highfalutin technical stuff back there tell you?
I'm going to need another coffee. I'm falling asleep.
Well, apparently doesn't tell John anything at the moment. He was bending over one of those machines. John Roberts, if you're hearing me now, the question is the effect of Hispanic voters.
Oh, Dan, I'm sorry. We were just caught up here with a little bit of pre-production. I'm sorry. We didn't realize that you were coming to us so soon. Dan, we're just going over the numbers here, and there was a tremendous amount of time, energy, and money spent reaching out to Hispanic voters. In fact, very often you heard the candidates actually speaking Spanish themselves.
Esta es la elección más importante de nuestras vidas.
Con su apoyo, vamos a ganar.
Of course, President Bush was after increasing his standing among Hispanic voters. Let's see if he did that. We'll go to our exit polling here and find out. 56% of Hispanic voters said that they were going for John Kerry, 41% for President Bush. But let's not forget that 4 years ago, this 56 was a 62, and this number was only a 35. So President Bush managed to increase his standing. A great get out the vote drive, too, among Hispanic Americans. 21% said that they were first-time voters. Where does the rubber meet the road? How could this help President Bush by increasing that standing? Right now, here's the state he's got his sights set on, New Mexico. He would love to put a George Bush on top of the 5 electoral votes there. We'll see if he does it very soon. Dan?
John Roberts, Ed Bradley, African-American votes?
You know, the Bush campaign made a concerted effort to make inroads into what has always been a bedrock of support for Democratic candidates. They didn't expect to win anything, but they just wanted to do better than they did in 2000. And if you look in key states, that's what they're doing. You take a look at the state of Florida, where Senator Kerry is winning 87-12, but that's 6 points less than Al Gore won. And particularly when those votes come in from Miami-Dade County, that could be a big factor there. You look at Ohio, he won 84-16. Big victory, but again, 5 points less than Gore 4 years ago. And also in Michigan, which you've been looking at, 89-9, and that's a drop of 2 points. And what changed the African-American vote by that margin? I think it was a church issue. It's a question of gay marriage, civil unions. I think it resonated with some of the church folk.
Ed Bradley. I'm going to give you a look at votes actually in and counted in Florida. CBS News has not estimated yet who is likely to carry Florida. That's the actual votes in and counted, with 94% of the precincts reporting. This race is hotter than a Times Square Rolex, and it has been all night long. Ohio, this is the way the votes in and counted in Ohio looks. 20 electoral votes. George Bush leading John Kerry with 58 of the precincts reporting. That's not all that many precincts, but Bush leads in Ohio. Going on down the list of states, in Iowa, 7 electoral votes, which could be critical to either man, with 46% of the precincts in. That's the way the actual votes in and counted look in Iowa. Minnesota, a state that's almost a must-carry for John Kerry now. 10 electoral votes, 28% of the precincts reporting John Kerry leading. These are all votes in and counted. In Wisconsin, another state that CBS News is not estimated to be in either man's corner yet, with 10 electoral votes, 28% of the precincts reporting, and George Bush leading John Kerry in Wisconsin. Still not many of the precincts in, well, better than a quarter of them. That would give the Bush people some hope, certainly. In Michigan, and this could be the proverbial Achilles heel for John Kerry. Mark the word could be. 17 electoral votes in Michigan. Polls have been closed a long time out there. 31% of the precincts reporting. We don't know where those precincts are, but I can tell you that the Kerry people do not like the look of this in the sense that President Bush is hanging in with them there in Michigan. Now in New Hampshire, which again, polls have been closed in New Hampshire seemingly forever, 66% of the precincts reporting, and this is the way the actual votes in and counted look. Senate winner in North Carolina, our CBS News estimate is that Representative Richard Burr will take over the open seat vacated by Democrat John Edwards, a pickup for the Republicans on the Senate side in North Carolina. This is election night on CBS. Back at CBS News election headquarters, we're showing you some of the votes in and counted with states where the polls have closed, but we don't have enough information to estimate who's going to win. In New Mexico, with votes actually in and counted, 48% of the precincts reporting close, but George Bush out front. Remember, these are votes that actually have been counted. These aren't projections, they aren't anybody's guesses or speculation. In Nevada, where the polls closed at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, 5 electoral votes at stake in Nevada. CBS News has not estimated either way which way we think it'll go, but with 3% of the precincts only reporting, that's the way it looks. So let's take you back, and we will be fairly constantly taking you back now to our presidential map, and here's why. The fat lady hasn't sung. In fact, the fat lady is not even warming up in her dressing room yet. But George Bush in this opera leads 219 to 199 with 270 needed to win. For the fat lady to even start warming up, one of these big states, Florida with 27, Ohio with 20, Michigan with 17, are going to have to drop before we know much more about how this is going to go. Now, there are all kinds of combinations in which John Kerry could, mark that word, could still win. Let me give you an example here. Try to use this reporter's notebook, if you can get it up there, Mr. Director. In my reporter's notebook now, George Bush needs 51 electoral votes to win. He could get those 51 by picking up, say, Florida with 27, Ohio with 20, and then picking up say, New Hampshire with New Hampshire's 4. That combination would give him what he needs to win. Now, with John Kerry needs 71. And John Kerry, if he, let's just say for the moment that George Bush would carry Florida, but Kerry would get Ohio, and if he got Ohio and got Michigan and got Wisconsin and Minnesota and got Iowa, 7, then if John Kerry got Oregon's 7, bingo, he could win. So that's one combination in which John Kerry could come from behind. But by any reasonable analysis, Bob Schieffer, it's Bush's to lose because he's ahead 219 to 199 in our estimate.
Let me put it this way. If John Kerry loses Florida and Ohio, he would have to win every other vote out there to get to a tie. And that would mean he'd also have to win Alaska, which is expected to go to a Republican. Florida and Ohio are going to wind up determining who the next president is, whoever wins those 2 states. We said it in the beginning, and it looks like that's what it's going to come down to, Dan.
True, but Ed Bradley, if either man wins Florida and Ohio, he's odds on to get the presidency. But if they split Florida and Ohio, it's still possible for either man to win, but it's tougher, much tougher for Kerry to
It
pull
is
out.
much tougher because you've got those small states, or the middle 3 as you call them, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. They have a total of 27 electoral votes. Florida alone has 27. We've been looking at Stark County in Ohio, which is a bellwether county. 9 of the last 10 elections, they've picked the winner in Ohio.
Yeah, that's right.
And at the moment, they are running with just 34% of the votes in, 51 for Kerry, 48 for Bush. So we're keeping an eye on Canton, Ohio. That's where Stark County is.
Leslie Stahl, we're still keeping an eye on who will control the next Senate. With the John Edwards Democratic seat in North Carolina falling in the Republican category, do the Democrats still have realistically a shot at getting control of the Senate?
Well, if President Bush wins re-election, then the Republicans will maintain control. However, if Kerry wins, then John Edwards, as vice president, becomes president of the Senate. So then the Republicans are going to need one more win tonight to maintain control. So
right.
It changes a little bit with who wins the presidency.
And that the most talked about race in South Dakota, Tom Daschle's effort to hold on.
Stunning. It's about a quarter of the votes in. It's dead even. That's a tabulated vote, the actual vote.
Bob Schieffer, in this presidential race, I keep looking at New Hampshire. We talk about Florida because it has 27 electoral votes, but New Hampshire has 4. The polls have been closed there since very early in the evening. That they closed there, at 8 o'clock. And still, we don't have New Hampshire in anybody's category.
You know, that's very interesting, Dan, because they started out, we were seeing in the early waves of exit polling that it looked like Kerry was going to win that. And Republicans have been telling me all week that if they were going to lose one that they won the last time, they thought it would be New Hampshire. But now we're seeing that closing somewhat. Exactly why we haven't called it yet, I don't know. But I would have expected, from what people were telling me all week, that we would have called that by now. And even the Republicans were saying that's the one that they thought they'd probably lose. They thought it would be the first one to flip.
This is the way the actual votes in and counted in New Hampshire look at this hour. Kerry leading 50% to 49% with only 66% of the precincts reporting. Dan Rather at CBS News Election Headquarters.
Join country music superstars, the CMA Awards, live CBS next Tuesday.
11:30 in the east, 8:30 in the west. Polls now closed in every state except Alaska. Reset your alarm clock. A late night is about to get later. At this hour, there are still 120 electoral votes up for grabs. Bush needs to win 51 of them to go over the top. Kerry needs to win 71. The battle for the big battleground states goes on. Here's the latest electoral vote count with 270 needed to win. Our CBS News projection is that George Bush has 219. We estimate that John Kerry has 199. That's why we say Bush needs 51 more to win. Kerry needs 71 more to win. Now, the national popular vote totals. These are votes actually counted and in. President Bush, who's led all evening long, 51% to Kerry's 48%. And we're now reaching the point where we'll have maybe 2/3 of the total vote, which will be something over 105 or 6 million votes, maybe as high as 120. We'll have to see. Let's go to the map. Bush states in red, Kerry states in blue, according to our estimates. Here's one way to look at it. While Florida with 27 electoral votes is still in a state of suspension. Ohio with 20, ditto. New Hampshire over with 4, been out there a long time, but still can be had by either man. Michigan was 17. This will surprise some people and worry a lot of Democrats. Doesn't mean Kerry's lost it. Does mean that it's closer than he would like it to be. Same story in Wisconsin with 10 electoral votes, and in Minnesota with 10, and in Iowa with 7. All of these are states that Al Gore carried the last time. Now, one way to look at this, as you look at the map, you go west, of course. In California, we estimate that John Kerry has California's big 55, which makes it the big enchilada of all the electoral vote states. Washington with 11. John Kerry may yet wind up with Oregon 7. But let's go back into the eastern part of the country, because one way to look at this now is that John Kerry, by our estimate, having carried Pennsylvania, now among Florida with 27 electoral votes, Ohio with 20, and Michigan with 17, John Kerry is now at the point where he absolutely must carry 2 of those 3 to keep his chances alive. That would keep his chances alive. If among Florida, Ohio, and Michigan, if John Kerry loses 2 of those 3, it's probably sayonara for him.
Oh, I think no question, Dan. Let me just correct one thing I said a while ago. He would have to get to a tie. If he lost Florida and Ohio, he would have to win Alaska. He would get to a tie without Alaska, which we believe Republicans are heavily favored to win Alaska.
Right. Let's go to Bill Plant at the White House. Well, Bill, the champagne there must be getting a little colder.
Well, I think they're getting a lot happier than they were. They started out a little bit tentative tonight. They weren't quite sure where all this was going, but their mood does indeed seem to have improved. Here's what they were telling us a few minutes ago, Dan. They said in Ohio, all counties are doing better than what the Bush team did in 2000. That means that they're going to lose some that went to the Democrats, but they're still doing better there than they were. They also say that in Florida, they were at or above their totals in every county except Miami-Dade, where they were only very slightly down. They regard all this as good news. And there was this peculiar bit of information. They claim to have seen an exit poll somewhere that showed them down 10 points in New Hampshire, but they say, if that is in fact true, and we don't know, they say now they're leaning ahead in New Hampshire, Dan.
Well, we'll see whether they are or not. It's certainly true that exit polling is not an exact science. In some ways, on its best days, it's kind of a crude art. And from time to time, exit polls will turn out to be stranger than the Marfa lights, and nobody can explain it. Maybe that's what's happening up in New Hampshire. Who can say? What we do feel confident in saying is that while Kerry still has a chance, he has a very good chance to win. It's still odds on at this hour for President Bush because he has 219 electoral votes with 270 needed to win. And Florida is still out there. And President Bush was quoted as saying to friends as late as Friday, I can only know one thing, and that is we're going to carry Florida. He seemed very confident about it. So with John Kerry, it's Florida, Ohio, and Michigan almost has to have. He has to have 2 of those 3 to keep his hopes alive. Now, Dan Rather with Ed Bradley, Bob Schieffer, Leslie Stahl around the table here. Some of our CBS News stations have been presenting their local news and election returns. We pause now for a moment to allow those stations to rejoin the network for our national election night coverage here on CBS. Now, back at what we hope will prove to be accuracy central for this election, our CBS News election headquarters in New York. Give you a look at the map. States in red, we estimate, have gone toward George Bush. A lot of red, it's true, but it isn't over because John Kerry has done well in the more populous states, some of them. We estimate he's carried Pennsylvania, New York, Illinois, California, and Washington. That's what's keeping him in the race at this moment. Let's go to Jim Axelrod, who is in Massachusetts with the Kerry campaign. Jim, earlier in the evening, they were smiling as my estimate now that they have gone to sort of a neutral position.
Let's pick up a little bit on what you've been saying, Dan, about the need to have Florida, Ohio, and Michigan, 2 out of those 3. A senior Kerry advisor, Mike McCurry, who used to be Bill Clinton's press secretary, now concedes it does not look good for the Kerry campaign in Florida. So their hopes and their attention is turning to Ohio, specifically Cuyahoga County, the county in which Cleveland sits. And their hopes specifically have to do with large African-American turnout in Cleveland and the surrounding areas. They hope that that kind of turnout will lead to the kind of victory in Ohio, which is beginning to seem more and more essential to the Kerry hopes. Dan?
Jim Axelrod with the Kerry campaign in Massachusetts. It's not over, but Kerry trails 199 to Bush's 219. And to repeat for emphasis, up here along the Great Lakes, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, this is an area on which John Kerry increasingly is going to have to win. Can't afford to lose anything in this area. If Florida drops away, as Jim Axelrod just said, some inside the Kerry campaign are now speculating that they may lose Florida. No presidential turnovers yet. This is a replay of 2000 so far, coming down to the same key states. And keep in mind, if George Bush carries every state he carried the last time, he would wind up with 278 electoral college votes instead of the 271 he got last time because of reapportionment on the basis of population. Some of the Bush states have increased their electoral college vote. So with no turnovers yet, George Bush is, it's virtually a replay of 2000. John Kerry has to carry all of the states that Gore carried, plus pick up one. His best chance of picking up one at the moment would be Ohio, because remember, President Bush carried Ohio the last time. Senator John Corzine in Washington, D.C., New Jersey's senior senator and chairman of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. Good evening. Thank you very much for being with us. It looks like an incredibly steep climb for you to get control of the Senate now.
I think that's probably right, but we had a steep climb to start with. We had 19 seats up, the Republicans 15. The 9 most competitive races were in tough territory. We had 5 retirements in the South, and most of our challenges to Republicans were in the West. All 9 of those states are likely to be solidly Republican, except Florida, which you have yet to call. So we had a steep hill. If we can stay where we were, 49-51, or maybe only lose a seat, I think we've done really well tonight.
What happened in the southern races, Senator? You thought you had a chance to pick up some seats there.
Well, we had great candidates, but presidents winning 15 to 20 points. Give you an example, in Kentucky, the president won 60-40, and our candidate's losing by 18,000 votes. It's virtually 50.5 to 49.5. Those are steep hills to climb when the top of the ticket is so overwhelmingly winning those presidential votes. So we've had tough climb. That's the same issue that Tom Daschle's dealing with in South Dakota. Looks like Ken Salazar is going to overcome it in Colorado. We think Tony Knowles will in Alaska as well. So we're going to push up towards that 48, 49 seats, and I'm disappointed we're probably not going to take it back, but holding it where we can really challenge the Republican leadership when it gets radical and ideological in its proposals is a good thing. There'll be good checks and balances in the Senate.
Well, Senator, if President Bush is reelected, and what you now expect, the Senate remains in control of the Republicans, the House is in control of the Republicans, the Supreme Court will be in the hands of the Republicans. What makes you think that you'll be able to get anything through in the way of an agenda over the next 4 years?
Well, even when you have the Senate in control of the Republicans, who still have to work together, Democrats can use the power of the filibuster to say no to extreme candidates to the Supreme Court, and use the power of the filibuster to stop legislation that's out of the mainstream. This is, any way you look at this, the country is very evenly divided, and we ought to find ways to work together, and I think the Senate's going to be one of those places where that most readily must occur.
Senator, thank you very much for being with us.
Good to be here.
Here at CBS News, former Mayor Rudy Giuliani will be on the air when we come back.
Merry Christmas!
When their daughter left town for the holidays, the Cranks made a bold decision.
Let's skip Christmas.
Skip Christmas?
But in this neighborhood,
A lot of the neighbors are pretty upset.
Christmas isn't just a tradition.
Perfect time to put up Frosty.
No!
Free Frosty! We just want Frosty!
It's an obsession.
I'm getting the ham. The ham is mine!
Ooh, Christmas with the Cranks. Rated PG. In theaters November 24th.
The LL Bean reversible down vest can make you comfortable in a lot of ways, including the price. It's one of many fresh looks and great prices you'll find in our catalog. Because the best values come direct from Freeport, Maine.
I like steak and chicken. Like the grilled shrimp, please. Sizzling in a skillet. Get 'em at Applebee's. Skillets, he likes sauce and mushrooms. Chicken, sure to please. He wants skillet sensations. They're back at Applebee's.
Applebee's skillet sensations are back. Eating good in the neighborhood.
First came CTS, built at the top-ranked plant for initial quality. And now comes the all-new STS. Lightning strikes twice. Cadillac, breakthrough.
Starting Wednesday, get ready for 5 new CSI New Yorks in a row.
That tunnel's gonna get built, and then I'm gonna die.
Fire in the hole!
He was trapped 700 feet below Manhattan, and he knew he was gonna die.
Accidents come with the territory.
These guys set their own rules.
What the hell was he doing there?
Someone left him down here intentionally. This isn't just a murder anymore. It's a conspiracy.
A new CSI New York, CBS Wednesday.
Back at CBS News election headquarters in New York, CBS News now feels comfortable in estimating that when all the votes are in and counted, George Bush will have carried Florida's 27 electoral votes. This is a case in 2000 where you remember George Bush wound up winning Florida and thus winning the election. This doesn't mean that he wins the election. It does mean that the noose is tightened around John Kerry. John Kerry stands, by our estimate, with 199 electoral votes with 270 needed to win. George Bush has 246. Now, what John Kerry has to do now is some version of roughly run the table on the big states that are still out there. That'd be Ohio with 20, Michigan with 17, Wisconsin with 10, Minnesota with 10, and Iowa with 7, pick up some combination of the others. While it's still doable with Kerry, no question now that Kerry's rapidly reaching the point where he's got it back to the wall, his short tail's on fire, and the bill collector's at the door. If he loses any of these states up along this West Coast region, that might be adios for him. But yet to come, it's not over, but clearly advantage Bush, with we estimate now 246 of the 270 electoral votes needed to win. On that note, we turn to former mayor of New York City, America's Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. Thanks for being with us, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Dan.
Any doubt in your mind that it's going to be George Bush?
I believe I've believed all along, even during those exit polls that were
kind of way out of line that it was going to be George Bush. I was in Ohio, I don't know how often. I almost feel like I'm a citizen of Ohio. I think he's going to pull out Ohio and win the election.
Well, the election highlighted, I think you'll agree, just how polarized the nation has become. How can we mend that rift, and how did we get to this point after 9/11?
Well, first of all, I think the way to mend the rift is for the president, and I'm sure he'll do it, to reach out to Democrats. I mean, to reach out to the people who voted against him, make it clear that he's their president. He wants to work for them just as hard as the people that voted for him. Maybe to consider bringing a couple of Democrats into the cabinet, the way John Kennedy did, the way he did, the way Bill Clinton did, you know, in earlier close elections. And I think we got there because, you know, we're at war. I mean, and this is very, very controversial, very difficult. The things you go through during war present images that people become very upset about, even if they originally agreed with the purpose. It's happened to us in the Civil War. Abraham Lincoln almost didn't win re-election. You know, there was a big draft riot in New York City. Wars are very, very difficult. And I think the president's going to win because he's shown a consistency of purpose. But I mean, he's going to have to reach out to the people that feel disaffected. And the president's good at that. I think once this election is over, he's going to be able to do what he did when he first got elected 4 years ago, you know, where he worked with Teddy Kennedy to get No Child Left Behind passed, worked with Democrats to get tax cuts. When he was governor of Texas, one of his strong points was working with Democrats in the state legislature. And I think when we get out of this partisan season, I think you'll see those aspects of George Bush come to the fore.
Why am I not to think, if I'm not to think it, that we will see Rudolph Giuliani in a cabinet position in a new Bush administration, and then he'll run for governor?
No, I'm very, very happy where I am. I did this. The work that I've done for President Bush, to the extent that I have, is out of tremendous respect for him. I think he's been a terrific leader. He came here to my city when we were in the worst shape we've ever been in our history, and he stood with us, and he helped us, and I couldn't have done it without him, and I feel a personal debt of loyalty to him, and I feel he's a great leader.
So if he offers you Attorney General at FBI, you'd take it?
I'm not looking for it. I'm happy in my security business, security consulting. I work with the colleagues I survive with, the people that I was in a building with, and we got out alive. Bernie Carrick and Richie Shearer and Tom Von Essen and Sonny and Tony Carbonetti and Denny and all. I mean, these are people that we've got a great business that we enjoy very much. We do security consulting all over the world. We're at the forefront of a lot of this stuff. So I'm not looking for a job.
Not ruling out running for governor, though.
I never rule out anything, you know, and discussions with the president are always private, and you never know, honestly, you never know what you're going to say if a president wants you to serve, but that's not something I'm seeking.
Mayor, thanks so much for being with us
Thank you very much.
Always good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you very much. With our CBS News electoral college count, 270 needed to win. We think that George Bush will have carried Florida when all the votes are in and counted. That means Bush has 246, Kerry has 199. Kerry needs 71 electoral votes to win. Bush only needs 24 now to come home a winner. Bob Schieffer.
I think we should just underline what we have been saying, Dan, and that is now if Kerry does not win Ohio, the best he can do is a tie.
Karen Hughes, longtime advisor of President George Bush, joins us from Washington. Welcome, Karen Hughes. The race seems deja vu all over again.
Well, Dan, I have to say it's very nice to see Florida in that win column. I know I talked with you several times 4 years ago during 36 very long days, so it's great to see Florida in the win column tonight. And I expect that shortly we'll be able to say that about Ohio as well. We're feeling very good about it. It's close, but we're talking to county chairmen across the state. They're telling us that we're doing better than expected in swing counties, that we're carrying many of those counties. We've had a big Republican turnout, and that we're doing better than we had projected in Democratic areas. So we're hoping that we'll be able to put Ohio in the win column shortly as well.
If you put Ohio in the win column, would you think that would close the race out?
Dan, I think so, although we still have to, obviously, the one state that President Bush carried last time that is still in question is New Hampshire and perhaps Nevada, although I think we feel pretty good about Nevada. It's early out there, but from what we've seen, we're feeling good about it. Where New Hampshire is very close. We're hearing good things, again, from people on the ground there. But I expect that, and I'm certainly hoping, I think it will be good for the country to be able to know who our president is this evening.
Do you expect we will know that sometime before 2 or 3 o'clock, or is your expectation it'll be later in the morning?
Well, Dan, you know, I'm not an expert, but I certainly hope so, and we're feeling good about what we're seeing, so I'm certainly hoping that'll be the case, and I'm hoping that the end result will be that President Bush will be reelected. It's looking very good right now. We're encouraged. We're upbeat. I talked to the president right before I came over here, and he's feeling very optimistic. He wanted me to thank all of the people who voted for him, all of his supporters, and all the people who worked so hard for him. It's you know, things are looking good. It's still a little early, and some of these states are still very close, as you know, but I'm hopeful that we might have an answer before the end of the evening.
And you think you're going to carry Ohio?
I believe so, based on what we're hearing from reports in the field right now. Right before I came over here, Karl Rove came in, where he's been monitoring vote totals from Ohio, talking to our county leaders in individual counties there, and they're all very upbeat. He came in and told our senior staff that it's close, but he's optimistic.
Karen Hughes, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Dan.
We'll see you along the trail. Thanks. At CBS News election headquarters, very much the lean is to Bush. No other way to say it. He has 246 electoral votes with 270 needed to win at this hour. Kerry with 199. Having said that, is it possible for Kerry still to win? Yes, it is. Kerry needs 71 electoral votes. He's going to have to get those from some combination of Ohio with 20. You just heard Karen Hughes say that around the White House they think they're going to carry Ohio. Remember, they carried Ohio the last time. But for John Kerry, Ohio's 20, Michigan's 17. Keep in mind, Michigan's been out there for a very, very long time, indicating that it's a close race. If John Kerry were to lose Michigan, hard to see how he could win. Wisconsin with 10, Minnesota with 10. These are all close. Iowa with 7. So when you say it's clearly advantaged Bush, it isn't just a matter of the numbers. Bush 246, Kerry 199 with 270 needed to win. It's where the outstanding votes still are. That New Mexico with 5 electoral votes, undecided. We have it in the undecided category. Nevada with 5. Oregon with 7. You might want to say, well, on the West Coast, John Kerry may pick up Oregon 7. Well, but what about Nevada with 5? New Mexico with 5. Don't forget New Hampshire out here with 4. The George Bush momentum is very clear at this hour. John Kerry needs something on the order of a 55 or 60-yard field goal to win this. It can be done, but its odds against would be the only legitimate way to say it at the moment. You're watching CBS News coverage of Election Night 2004. Back at CBS News election headquarters, Bob Schieffer.
Yes, sir.
Got anything to contribute? Leslie Stahl.
I've got, well, I can't tell you which way the wind is blowing in the Senate, but you heard Senator Corzine say all but concede control. I thought he was basically saying that the Democrats now cannot take over because the outstanding races are all in Bush territory. In Florida, where we've just seemed to be projecting the state for President Bush, we are still saying that race is razor close, razor thin close between Mel Martinez and Betty Castor. And all the others are outstanding, but I don't think there's any way now that the Democrats can retake. They're only trying to hold the margin down as best they can. Look at that. That's Florida, 49 to 49, with 97% of the precincts in, and we are not ready to predict in that case. And the others are just as close. South Dakota is the same thing with Daschle, the Democratic Senate leader. Kentucky, we may not know till tomorrow. We've already said that. We have Colorado, Alaska still outstanding, and Louisiana.
Ed Bradley.
Ohio. We just talked to a source in the Kerry campaign in Ohio, and they're disagreeing, obviously, with what Karen Hughes said, which I'm sure doesn't surprise you at this point. But they are not conceding Ohio. They say that they've done better in the rural counties than Vice President Gore did in the year 2000. They think they're going to do very well in Cuyahoga County, which is Cleveland. And they're also looking at Athens, which is the University of Ohio. They think they will do well. They're saying they're going to win Ohio by 3 points.
And why did Florida go for Bush?
Because, as we said earlier in the evening, that this was a referendum on the president, on the president's job approval. And if you look at what happened in Florida, by 52% to 46, people approved of his job performance in the White House. Also, he won among men. He won seniors. he won among Hispanics, and he won among those people who go to church every week.
Bob Schieffer, last time we had a presidential election in which the eventual loser, by the Supreme Court decision as well as the votes, got the most votes nationally, but lost in the Electoral College in the end, Al Gore. Now, this time, should George Bush, should he go on to win, he's got a chance to carry the national vote with him as well.
I think so, and I think that'd be a very good thing. We said at the beginning of this broadcast, and I think as important as anything else that happens tonight is that whoever wins decisively, because I think part of the division we've seen in this country over these past 4 years actually began that night when one person won the popular vote, another was eventually ruled the winner of the election. So I hope whoever wins tonight wins both ways, wins the Electoral College and also wins the popular vote. It would just be good for the country, it seems to me.
Well, let's take a look at the national vote as it stands at this hour. Now, not nearly all of the votes are in and counted. But with probably 3/4 of the vote in, at least 2/3, probably 3/4 of the vote in, George Bush is running 51% to John Kerry's 48%. That just gives you an idea where things are. Remember, there'll be well over 100 million votes cast this time, we think. Now, back to the presidential map, because everything rides on this now. George Bush with 246, that includes Florida. In our estimate, John Kerry with 199. Let's go to Anthony Mason in Florida. Anthony, you have some information that maybe there'll be challenges to today's vote bubbling up there?
Well, Dan, the stage has been set for challenges if, in fact, this race is still deadlocked come sunup. Here are a couple of the key legal challenges we're looking at. In Pennsylvania, for example, Republicans have gone to federal court to get a list of everyone who received an absentee ballot and to ask for time to investigate whether any of those ballots are illegitimate. Next door, in hotly contested Ohio, Democrats have filed a pair of lawsuits, one against several counties accusing them of not providing enough voting machines, another against the Secretary of State for his rules on the counting of provisional ballots. And in Michigan, Republicans filed suit in state court claiming their challengers were illegally removed from polling places. Now, these suits, as I say, are setting the stage. If we still have essentially a deadlocked election come tomorrow morning, it could give either party a chance to challenge that result, Dan.
Anthony Mason in Florida. And CBS News estimated, and has been estimating for quite a few minutes now, that Florida will fall into the George Bush column as it did the last time. Now, Bob Schieffer, double check me as we go along here, because it narrows down how John Kerry can win. Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa. John Kerry has got to have virtually a sweep of those. That includes Ohio, as well as picking up some in New Hampshire and something like New Mexico, Nevada, Oregon. It's still out there for Kerry to win, but we've said it before and say it again. At this hour with Bush, we're fairly confident he has at least 246 electoral votes. Should President Bush win in Ohio or Michigan, then it's all over for Kerry.
I think that's right. I think that's exactly right.
It wouldn't be quite enough because he carried Ohio the last time, so he'd need something else besides Ohio. But between New Hampshire, New Mexico, Nevada, Oregon, probably would get it.
Kerry cannot win without Ohio.
Dan Rather at CBS News Election Headquarters in New York. Stay here with us.
Get ready for the start of the new Amazing Race. Premiere CBS Tuesday, November 16th.
We've crossed into Wednesday in the East and still no winner in the presidential race, but President Bush has made a big leap forward toward victory. He takes Florida's 27 electoral votes by our estimate and now stands just 24 short of victory. Senator Kerry needs 21, according to our projections, with a dwindling field of states in which to find them. Now, here's the state of the electoral vote count with 270 needed to win. Our CBS News estimate is that George Bush has at least 246. Kerry has 199. Here's how the popular vote stands at this hour. These are votes actually in and counted. Bush leading Kerry about 51 to 48%. Still no presidential turnovers. If you look at our map, looking at the map, the Bush states in red, the blue states backing Senator Kerry. No turnovers. Alaska is still open. The only Bush 2000 states hanging fire tonight, these are ones that he won the last time, are Nevada, New Hampshire, and Ohio. Now let's give you a look at the actual votes in and counted. Ohio, well, first New Hampshire. New Hampshire has only 4 electoral votes. Been close there all night. John Kerry leads in New Hampshire. We'll see how that one turns out. Now with Ohio with 20 electoral votes. Very hard to see how John Kerry could win if he doesn't carry Ohio. In fact, we say that if he doesn't carry Ohio, that's probably it for him. That keep in mind that George Bush carried it the last time. This is the way the votes actually in and counted in Ohio. Karen Hughes, a principal advisor to President Bush, was very optimistic and upbeat about Ohio on our air fairly recently. And Nevada, with 5 electoral votes in Nevada, George Bush carried it the last time. This is the way it shapes up with votes actually in and counted. Now, let's go now to Barack Obama, who, apparently we're still getting him hooked up. We hope to have him fairly soon. Mika Brzezinski, let's go over to you at our decision desk. If you look at the popular vote, Bush is ahead in Ohio. So why no projection for Bush?
Because we're still waiting for the vote count in on the Cleveland area, the heavily Democratic Cuyahoga County. That could affect the president's lead. And again, keep in mind, Ohio is a state with 1 million new voters. So there's a lot of moving parts here.
How about Michigan? I'm puzzled about Michigan. Any information on Michigan, why it's been suspended for so long?
Well, you know, we're looking at Michigan closely here. In fact, there's a lot of discussion here at the decision desk about it. There is a Kerry lead if you look at what we've got in, but we're waiting on several precincts in the northern part of the state. Those precincts, for the record, are historically Democratic, but we just don't have them in the northern part of the state from Michigan.
Same thing with Wisconsin and Minnesota?
Wisconsin, simply too close to estimate. We've got the vote count right now, which is too close to estimate in Wisconsin. I'll get back to you on Minnesota.
Okay, Mika Brzezinski at our decision desk. Let's take a look at, I was pausing for just a moment to see whether Barack Obama, the young Democratic candidate in Illinois, who by our CBS News estimate has rather easily racked up one of these Democratic Senate turnover victories in Illinois. Mr. Obama, if you're with us, perhaps I should call you Senator Obama, although you're not sworn in yet. Thank you very much, and thank you for understanding that in live television things don't always work out perfectly. The Democrats obviously now face an extremely difficult battle to win the control of the Senate. Will any of the issues on the Democratic must-do list get done if, as it now looks is going to be the case, the Republicans control the Senate?
Well, you know, my hope obviously is that Democrats can retain a slim majority, but my understanding of the Senate is that you need 60 votes to get something significant to happen, which means that Democrats and Republicans have to ask the question, do we have the will to move an American agenda forward, not a Democratic or Republican agenda forward? And I think that when you look at issues like health care or the war on terrorism or the education of our children, we should be able to find some common ground and be as constructive as possible regardless of who's in power.
Well, that's obviously the hope, but we heard a lot of talk along those lines after the last presidential election, and it didn't work out that way. And again, coming back to the reality, with the Republicans having control of the House and the House leadership being, if anything, more aggressive than the Republican leadership in the Senate, we get back to, is it really possible for the Democrats to get anything done?
Well, you know, the thing I'll note, Dan, is that this past Congress was probably one of the least productive in recent memory. And I think it was not very productive because there wasn't an honest recognition on the part of those in control of the levers of power that it's possible for you to overreach and to alienate the opposition. So my hope would be that in this circumstance, we recognize, and this is certainly something that the people of Illinois said to me very clearly in my race, what people want is not a lot of slash and burn politics, but what they want are practical common sense solutions to the problems that we face. And I certainly would give that advice to, if Democrats were in control, to Tom Daschle in the same way that if Bill Frist is in control for the Republicans.
You'll be the lone American of African heritage in the U.S. Senate, bound to place all kinds of expectations and responsibilities along with that. How do you feel about that?
Well, you know, my first responsibility will be to the people of Illinois who are sending me there. And I'm a junior senator coming in, making sure that I learn the ropes, that I understand how the Senate operates as an institution, and that I do my very best to deliver for the people of Illinois. But to the extent that I can serve a role in framing the debate around issues that are important to African Americans, to help unify the country and heal some of the wounds that date back for centuries in this nation, and to the extent that I can be a role model for those coming behind me, I'm happy to do that, as long as I'm doing that in the context of serving the people of Illinois.
Senator-elect Barack Obama, thank you very much for being with us. Congratulations on what we estimate to be a clear victory for you tonight. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Leslie Stahl, this young man clearly is going to be a star in the Senate, although he's destined to be a member of the minority party if everything goes the way we think it's going to go. Any possibility of other Democratic turnovers, such as he got in Illinois, or is it pretty much Republicans the rest of the way now?
Well, no one's going to win the way he did, because he was so far ahead for months and months. But one of the hopes that the Democrats are still looking at is in Colorado with Ken Salazar, who is a Hispanic American and the Attorney General. But look at these numbers here. Isn't this something? 64% of the vote in, and it's 49-49. He's up against Pete Coors, who runs the Coors Beer Company and got himself all twisted up defending the beer ads that are very sexy. He's a conservative Republican, and it's just neck and neck. This is one of the things that Senator Corzine was talking to you about, Dan, how hard it is for these Democrats to run in these states that are so Republican and where President Bush has done so well. But they are saying they are still hoping that Ken Salazar can pick up that seat, take it over from the Republicans, Ben Nighthorse Campbell retiring out in Colorado.
Leslie Stahl, thanks. CBS News has just added to its projected category the fourth electoral vote from Maine to Senator Kerry's total. That would give Senator Kerry now a new total of, well, my board says 207, but I estimated it. Oregon, 7 electoral votes in Oregon, we estimate, go to Senator Kerry. So you remember earlier, Senator Kerry was 199. We add one of the electoral votes, the fourth electoral vote from Maine, to Senator Kerry. That took him to 200. And our CBS News estimate is, when all the votes are in and counted from Oregon, that John Kerry will have carried Oregon 7 electoral votes. So our count, our estimate, our projections now stand at Bush 246, Kerry 207. Now back to that situation in Maine. Maine has 4 electoral votes, but in Maine, they have a different situation than every other state, with the exception of Nebraska. Colorado had it up tonight as a possibility. It's my understanding that's not carrying in Colorado, but we'll see. But in Maine, earlier in the evening, we had put 3 of Maine's 4 electoral votes in the Kerry category because we felt confident in estimating how the 3 of the 4 congressional districts were going to go. That's the way they apportion their votes. So I recognize that this, some people may say, listen, you have to understand advanced calculus to understand this. It's really not all that complicated, that Maine just chooses to allocate the electoral votes according to who wins in what congressional districts. We now make it all 4 of the electoral votes will be going for John Kerry when all the votes are in and counted in Maine. So with Oregon now falling into his corner, by our estimate, John Kerry has crept up to 207, still trailing George Bush by 246. And while, as you noted from Karen Hughes' interview and other information coming out of the White House, they're feeling pretty good in the White House. Mayor Rudolph Giuliani was by here a while back. They're feeling pretty good about winning the presidency. They're not quite there yet. John Kerry is in the position of, if you want to use the metaphor, he's got to draw to an inside straight. But hey, sometimes you get the right card and you hit that straight. Ohio, 20 electoral votes, Michigan, 17, Wisconsin, 10, Minnesota, 10, Iowa, 7, New Hampshire, 4 is still out there, New Mexico with 5, undecided. We've got it in the, we haven't estimated it as yet. Nevada has 5 as well. And then we have Hawaii with 4. It's also colored white. You might say, well, it nearly always goes Democratic. Well, yes, it nearly always goes Democratic in presidential races. However, Vice President Dick Cheney would not have flown all the way out there overnight and put that lei around his neck and sort of hula danced, if you will, unless he thought there was a chance of carrying it out there. Got to go to commercial, but just before we do, Bob Schieffer.
Well, I'll tell you, if we've talked about if Bush wins Ohio, it's about all over for Kerry. But I'll tell you, and we'll talk about this when we come back, if Bush loses Ohio, then it turns everything around. We'll talk about that.
More about that when we come back. Right now, these messages, stay here with us. Pour an extra cup of coffee if you have to.
Yeah. I want the money Bush is 11 stole from me, $160 million. You got 2 weeks.
Huh. We're too hot to work in this country.
Where are we going? In the physical universe we occupy. It cannot be done.
Hey, can I ask you something? It's not my nature to be mysterious. But I can't talk about it, and I can't talk about why.
Ooh. Rated PG-13. Starts Friday, December 10th.
Eyes match your PJs. There's a Visine for that.